Tony Stark asked what would happen if a more powerful alien civilization invaded Earth. In fact, this sentence is more like asking yourself. It's more like saying, if you don't prepare yourself, then once the Earth loses, the person most responsible for this result is yourself. As the person who knows Tony best, Pepper definitely knows what Tony is thinking. Gently holding Tony's hand, Peepo said with a very serious expression, maybe there are more powerful civilizations in the universe, but don't forget, we still have Avengers. Perhaps those alien civilizations are very powerful, even so powerful that the Earth has no way to stop them. But, we also have Mr. Superman. Sue will always be on our side, on the side of the Earth. Tony, bash the Earth will lose in the face of a more powerful alien civilization. But as long as you, Sue, and Steve are here, then we will never give up. But. No but, Tony, you put too much pressure on yourself. Holding Tony's cheek, Peepo said very seriously, I know what you want to express is that the stronger a person's ability is, the greater his responsibility will be. But Tony, none of us can predict the future, just like none of us know that we will have a son or a daughter in the future. Don't think so much, instead of worrying about the future every day, it's better to focus on the present. At least, we are still alive now, at least, we can still see the warm sunshine every day. Facing Peepo's gentle eyes, Tony Stark looked at her with his lips pursed, and suddenly said after a while, actually, I think having a daughter is a good choice. Well, Clint already has a daughter. When Sue and I went to visit Clint and his wife 2 days ago, we saw the newborn baby. God, she's small, soft, and just so cute. My heart just melts after seeing that little girl. Speaking of this, Tony Stark counted with his fingers. Clint has a daughter now, Natasha Romanoff and Dr. Banner are due to physical reasons. Well, although it is not polite to say so. As for Steve, maybe one day he will open up and embrace life again and live his own life, but definitely not now. Steve isn't ready for a new relationship right now. God bless him. Where is Sue? In fact, anyone with a discerning eye can see that he is already with Wanda. Although Wanda pursued Sue first, we are very optimistic about them both. However, Wanda is only 17 years old this year, and she will have to wait at least 3 or 4 years. As for Thor, the guy who always calls himself a god, he's pretty close to Jane Foster now, but I still. With that said, Tony looked at Peepo. Wow, looking at it this way, I suddenly feel that maybe we should try harder. At the very least, our baby will probably be the second child born in the extended Avengers Alliance family. Well, assuming Clint and his wife Laura don't own another cabin for a year or two. Listening to Tony counting the relationship status of the members of the Avengers Alliance with his fingers, and who will succeed Clint to give birth to the little Avenger. Pepper tilted his head and smiled at Tony, so, is this a marriage proposal? Well. When he heard the word of marriage proposal, Tony, who was still counting other people's situation in detail, suddenly lost his temper. Although he knew that Peepo would be his future wife. Moreover, when he and Peepo were together, it was indeed a relationship based on the premise of marriage. The most important thing is that I have already identified it as her. But, upon hearing the proposal, marriage, Tony Stark inexplicably felt his heartbeat start to speed up. Damn it. I will not be afraid of marriage, but have marriage phobia. Well, I'm not forcing you to marry me now. Seeing Tony's face change slightly, Peepo said, although we are together now, it doesn't mean that I will marry you. Oh Kong man Peepo, don't do that. Seeing that Peepo's face was a bit ugly, Tony Stark quickly coaxed. You know Peepo, there is only one person I will marry in the future, and I can't imagine there will be anyone else besides you. I'm just not ready yet. Yeah. Looking at Tony with a half smile, Peepo immediately stood up from the sofa. Then wait until you're ready. Do not do that. Seeing that Peepo got up and was about to go back to the room, Tony quickly grabbed Peepo. Don't be angry, Peepo, you know me best, so you should know how much I love you. Rot. He turned his head to look at Tony, who was nervous, as if he was apologizing for saying something wrong. Peepo suddenly laughed. Didn't you say that you want our child to be the second child born in the Avengers Alliance? Then what are you waiting for? After finishing speaking, Peepo turned around and walked towards the bedroom. Wow. Hearing what Pepper said, Tony Stark's eyes lit up. Although I am not ready for marriage yet. However, if you can have a baby of your own, it seems to be a very good thing. Tony Stark, who was still a little anxious about the invasion of the Earth by alien civilizations. At this moment, these concerns have long been put aside, and while catching up with Peepo, they are excitedly discussing whether the child will be a boy or a girl in the future. What should the child be named? Where does it look like an anxiety attack? Well, have to say. Sure enough, the person who knows Tony best will always be Pepper Potts. A simple sentence directly turned Tony from anxiety to anticipation. At the same time, with the same expectation, there is a guy named Justin Hammer. I don't know what method you used to make me obsessed with providing you with a large amount of funds, materials and equipment. Ivan Vanke looked like he was clutching his ribs, but after being rescued by his own people, his overall spirit was very good. Justin Hammer said while eating the ice cream in front of him, "But I don't care, as long as you have money, you can buy things like materials. As it happens, I have a lot of money. Although this is thanks to that guy Tony Stark for announcing like an idiot, permanently closing the Stark Industries weapons manufacturing department. However, Mr. Ivan Vanke, I think that since you can manufacture the arc reactor, it should be no problem to manufacture 10 Iron Legions. There is still half a month before the expo will open, so if you are willing to help, then I think our cooperation will be very pleasant. After all, you and I really hate that pompous Tony Stark, don't we?" Looking at Ivan Vanke in front of him, Justin Hammer smiled and said, "Door. Inside Ta Hualan Cafe. Thank you very much." After looking at the group photo that I was thinking of, the two beautiful girls thanked me very politely, and then left excitedly chattering. Steve smiled at Suche who was sitting opposite him. "I found out that the people who came to take pictures with you seem to be some young and beautiful girls." Envious. Picking up the unsweetened black coffee and taking a sip, Suche asked Steve with a smile. "That's not true, I have already enjoyed this kind of sought-after treatment 70 years ago." After making a joke with Suche, Steve leaned on the seat and said with emotion, "The past half a month has been really peaceful. I like this kind of peaceful life. By the way, if you have nothing to do in the afternoon, how about going fishing together? It seems that since the establishment of the Avengers Alliance, we have not gone fishing together for a long time. There's nothing wrong with me." Facing Steve's invitation, Suche put down the coffee cup in his hand. "But S.H.I.E.L.D. is almost finished?" "It should be. I don't know much about the situation in the building." Looking at the streets with people coming and going outside the window, Steve's expression was very relaxed. "Even if I have a second job in S.H.I.E.L.D., at best I can only lead the action team. But since Hydra was eliminated, S.H.I.E.L.D. has recruited a large number of passerby agents. I want to use this to fill the vacancies of those positions that lost Hydra. However, although these passerby-level agents all came out of the eagle's nest that Natasha Romanoff said. Although I have received some training, the gap is still very large. So that sometimes I take these rookies to perform tasks, but I have to tell them what to do. How to say. It seems to be thinking about how to describe it." Steve organized the language, and then said to Suche, "It's like the kind of student who can hold a book, the theory is very solid, but the actual operation is very rough. But it's not without gains. Some time ago, I met a retired soldier named Sam Wilson. He has a really cool outfit that flies through the air like a bird's wings." "Sam Wilson. Seems to be your fan." Hearing Steve mention Falcon Sam, Sudi nodded to show that he knew. "Definitely, as long as you are in the military, it seems hard not to be my fan. Especially the group of people who grew up listening to my stories and brochures. You also know that if I had been alive 70 years ago, the military probably wouldn't have played up my heroics. But, 10 years ago, I was frozen into a deep sleep." Slightly smugly smiled at Suche. Actually, Steve wasn't bragging, it was more like self-deprecating. Only in front of Suche, Steve will let go of all burdens, dare to say any jokes. Yeah, for those guys, in some ways, sometimes a dead captain of Magnesia is always more valuable than a living Steve Rogers. "So, you're going to make that fan named Sam Wilson a reserve member of the Avengers Alliance?" "I have this plan." In front of Suche, Steve didn't hide the slightest bit. "Our Avengers Alliance team is very good now, even if there is something about Bucky between me and Tony. But in the end there won't be any conflict until Bucky is found. But the number of people in the Avengers Alliance is still a bit small." Picking up the coffee and taking a sip, Steve glanced at the cold coffee in his hand. Then he put it on the table. "Maybe our Avengers Alliance team is enough to deal with ordinary aliens. But just like Tony worried, what if one day we have to face a stronger enemy? I know, whether we win or lose, our team will face it together, but if possible, I don't want to lose. Once we lose, the consequences we face may be unacceptable. So, I want to increase the number of Avengers members." As she said that, she watched Selena walk over and put herself into a cup of warm coffee. Steve smiled and thanked Selena. After Selena left, Steve continued to Suche. "No matter what, with more strength, there is always a chance. You don't have anxiety attacks too?" Seeing Steve's serious expression, Suche asked seriously, "How do you feel that you are infected by Tony's anxiety? You must know that half a month ago, Dr. Banner told me that Tony was full of anxiety, so he wanted to put a war box on the Earth. Then I agreed with him to take away the psychic scepter as a research material, but now you bring up this matter again? Dude, don't tell me you have the same anxiety attacks as Tony. You know Tony's pretty much out now, at least he's got his anxiety under control. Dude, if you're like that, I have nowhere to find you another peepo. How can it be? Facing Suche's gaze, Steve shook his head immediately, indicating that he had no problem. Just after talking with Tony 2 days ago, this idea came to my heart. Tony wants to install a layer of armor on the Earth, and he wants to add more power to the Avengers Alliance. Have you spoken to Tony about this idea? Listening to Steve's words, Suche asked while stirring the coffee in the cup. Not yet. Taking a long breath, Steve looked at Suche and said, Dude, you are the soul of our team, so I definitely need to talk to you about this idea first. If you agree, then when the Avengers Alliance team meets, there should be less opposition. Okay, don't flatter me. Looking at Steve, Suche smiled angrily. I found that you have become more and more able to accept this new world recently, and your personality has changed a lot. But add some power to the Avengers Alliance, I don't have any opinion. After thinking for a while, Suche looked at Steve and said, but first of all, we should pay more attention to character. We can't bring in a guy with a strength of but poor character. As for the Avengers Alliance reserves, your Sam Wilson should be fine. As far as I know, the coveting of Tony's armor, although the proposal was made by Hydra at the beginning. I want to make a hearing. After the Hydra member named Stern was uprooted, the hearing will be shelved. But those guys in Congress never gave up on the chance to get Tony's armor. In order to silence the mouths of these guys, Tony gave Rhodes a set of armor he can trust. Stopping the hand stirring the coffee cup, Suche looked at Steve and said, this Colonel Rhodes, who has Tony's armor, can also be included in the Avengers Alliance reserve team. What's more, if you really want to add a reserve member to the Avengers Alliance, then you actually have this strength. Avengers Alliance reserves? I don't have any problems in principle. Avengers Alliance base, Avengers Alliance internal meeting site. Hearing Suche and Steve's proposal, Tony Stark spread his hands and said, but I think we must examine the character of the joiners. We can't let the opponent join us just because he is capable, and we can't just add some people just because we lack manpower. At least, we have to investigate clearly the Xing part. Tony's voice fell, and Natasha Romanoff on the side also nodded in agreement. I agree with Tony's idea on this point. Otherwise, the ability is very strong, but the heart is very arrogant, even evil. This will be a catastrophe for our Avengers Alliance. After all, our Avengers Alliance is different from S.H.I.E.L.D., and the events we face are also different. Sue, did you hear that? Natasha Romanoff is at me. Hearing what Natasha Romanoff said, Tony Stark immediately turned his head, and said to Suche as if complaining, she's saying I'm arrogant. Come on Tony, your arrogance is and everybody knows it. Facing Tony's trickery, Natasha Romanoff said with a smile. TCH, because we have fought side by side more than once, I won't send you a lawyer's letter. After finishing speaking, Tony turned his head to look at Bruce Banner. Dude, do you have any ideas? I have nothing to say. Seeing everyone's gazes, Dr. Banner pursed his lips and shook his head. I think it would be good to have more Avengers Alliance members. After all, we can't have to personally dispatch everything, at least the less Hulk appears, the less damage will be caused. And what about Thor? I naturally support it. Anyway, as long as my salary is not reduced, it is not a problem to increase the number of people. And we in Asgard have a saying that the more people you can trust, the more victories you will have on the battlefield. Listen to Thor have his say too. Suche nodded. Well, except for Clint who is accompanying his wife and newborn baby, so he didn't come to attend this Avengers Alliance meeting. All members agree, so let's add Avengers Alliance members to prepare for this proposal to pass unanimously. In this case, if you think there is any suitable candidate, you can propose it. I will come first. Looking at the crowd, Suche said earnestly. I suggest that the Avengers Alliance increase the number of reserve members, first of all is Wang Tian. Everyone here, including Thor, is very familiar with Wanda, and I think everyone understands her character very well. The most important thing is that Wanda is now 17 years old and has slowly mastered the Crimson Magic, which is a very powerful ability. I can be one of the reserve members of the Avengers Alliance. Another point is that I have talked with Wanda. Wang Chi has no doubts about joining the Avengers Alliance. Facing Suche's recommendation, no one showed any hesitation. After all, after Wanda was taken over from Sokovia, she grew up under the noses of everyone. Plus her relationship with Suche. Therefore, no one objected to Suche's recommendation. I also have a recommendation quota here. Seeing that everyone unanimously approved Wanda's decision to join the Avengers Alliance, Steve said. I know a retired soldier named Sam Wilson, who is very nice. He has experienced combat since. That's why I think it's worth recommending. After all, the set of flight equipment that I asked S.H.I.E.L.D. to get back can not only fight, but also serve as a member of the Avengers Alliance's investigation. Maybe this is what our Avengers Alliance needs. Then I have a recommendation from here. Hearing Steve mention that Sam Wilson, Tony said, I have a friend you should know, that is Colonel Rhodes. He wore a set of my battle armor. Although this guy has a bit of a poisonous mouth, he is still an idiot who named the suit of armor I gave him War Machine. But I think he could be one of the reserve members of our Avengers Alliance. After listening to the recommendations of Tony and Steve, other members of the Avengers Alliance also agreed. On the contrary, Thor hesitated for a while, and then asked, what do you think of Loki? Well, pretend I didn't say it. Facing the eyes of everyone looking over, Thor spread out his hands as if he hadn't said anything. 2. After all, Loki led the Chitauri invasion of Earth and ended up having him join the Avengers now. It seems that it is really not good, but it doesn't matter, anyway, there will be a long time in the future. Well, I have to find a way to break my younger brother over, so that my mentality becomes normal. The longer he spends with fellow Avengers, the more comfortable Thor feels. If there are these partners, Loki can also join in. Well, Thor thinks, the roadbed must get better. Save yourself having nothing to do and thinking about how to stab yourself in the stomach all day long. Nah, Dr. Banner, do you have any other suggestions? Ignoring Thor's proposal, he looked at Bruce Banner and Natasha Romanoff and asked with a smile. It's not that he disagrees with Loki joining. But in terms of the current situation, Loki is really not suitable. Let's wait until Loki gets better from the Time Administration. Tisk. I don't know if Loki in this universe still has a chance to enter the Time Administration. Well, as to where and what Loki is doing right now. Su Che didn't know what meant. The original trajectory of Loki, including many people present, had changed. It's really not good to look at it according to the original plot. I have no one to recommend. Hearing Su Che's inquiry, Natasha Romanoff and Dr. Banner shook their heads. Okay, since Natasha Romanoff and Dr. Banner don't have anyone to recommend, the Avengers Alliance reserves are tentatively 3 people. Steve, Tony, after the meeting is over, please both of you to inform Sam and Rhodes. In addition, joining the Avengers Alliance reserve team does not mean that you are a part of the Avengers Alliance. The 3 of them must also undergo training and testing. Only when the test passes and we are satisfied with their test results can they officially join the team. As for how to test and train, Steve will trouble you. Natasha Romanoff and I will find some targets for them to practice with. Hearing what Su Che said, the Avengers Alliance members present did not have any objections. After the meeting was over, Natasha Romanoff looked at Su Che and said with a smile, then how are you going to test them? I didn't think so. Facing Natasha Romanoff's inquiry, Su Che shook his head very frankly. But let's start with the simplest one first. By the way, nah, you should have some goals. Avengers Reserve? Listen to Natasha Romanoff report back from Maria Hill. Nick Fury put down his coffee cup. Who suggested this? It should be Captain Rogers who first proposed it. After all, we took the equipment of Sam Wilson back for Captain Rogers' sake. Captain Rogers is quite appreciative of this Sam Wilson, so he talked to Sue about it. Then Sue called the Avengers members for a meeting and decided on a proposal to form the Avengers Reserve team. Currently, there are 3 Avengers Reserve members. The first is Wanda, the second is Sam Wilson recommended by Captain Rogers, and the third is Colonel James Rhodes recommended by Tony Stark. That is to say, Captain Steve Rogers proposed, and after Sue agreed, the Avengers Alliance meeting was held. Gently nodded. Since Sue agrees, then there is no problem. By the way, did I ask you to find any clues? There's no clue. Facing Nick Fury's inquiry, Hill shook his head. There are many people with the name Scott Lang. Even after I screened out one side, there are still many who meet the conditions you gave. Only related to that Dr. Pym, that is, none. In addition, these people named Scott Lang, some are construction workers, some are company executives, and some are homeless. There is even one who is serving his sentence in prison at the moment. For a long time, Dr. Pym has been under the surveillance of our S.H.I.E.L.D. Although he was discovered by him once, he has become more cautious. But apparently, Dr. Pym has never had contact with anyone named Scott Lang. Listening to Hill's answer, Nick Fury said he knew. Although in the Black Gold Diary, I know the news about Ant-Man. But just from the name of Scott Lang, I want to find this superhero nicknamed Ant-Man. It's like finding a needle in a haystack. Although I know that Ant-Man is related to Dr. Pym. But it turns out that Dr. Pym never had access to Scott Lang. Well, there's a good chance the timeline hasn't arrived yet. By the way, what happened to the research in Tahiti? Pyro was born. When mentioning the department in Tahiti, Maria Hill couldn't help but think of Phil Coulson. But fortunately, after Phil Coulson was washed out of that period of memory, although he said that sometimes he would have some inexplicable nightmares at night. But overall it's good. People. Yes, according to the experiment in Tahiti, one of the near-dead experimental subjects mastered the ability of flame after being resurrected. With that said, Maria Hill dug up Pyroman's information and handed it to Nick Fury. Fireman, formerly known as Isaac Carl. He used to work in the 3rd Squadron of the SHIELD Operation Group. He was seriously injured in the battle with Hydra hidden in SHIELD. According to the doctor's diagnosis, even if the treatment is cured, the rest of my life can only be spent in a hospital bed. After receiving this diagnosis, I voluntarily accepted the unripe experiment in Tahitian. According to the reports of researchers in Tahiti, the genes of the Carl and Kree mutated after the integration, the cells were extremely active, and the ability to control flames was born. Having said that, Hill frowned. In addition to Carl, there are actually 2 soldiers in the SHIELD Operation Group who have cell mutations. It's just that the ability has not yet appeared. Unfortunately, the rest of those who also volunteered to participate in this fledgling experiment with this technology did not survive. Flipping through the documents that Hill brought back, after seeing the last page, Nick Fury frowned and asked, "What about the specific analysis?" Carl's specific analysis has not yet reached a conclusion, but it is listed as a key observation object. Because since the end of the experiment, everyone has discovered that his personality has changed a lot. Although he was originally a member of the action team, his personality is very peaceful on weekdays, similar to that of Phil Coulson, and he hates eating oranges. But after the experiment, his temper became irritable and out of control, and he especially likes to eat fruits like oranges. The most important thing is that every time his anger is over, he will forget the memory of when he lost control. Hearing what Hill said, Nick Fury raised his eyebrows and said, "Just like Dr. Banner." No, Dr. Banner can at least control his anger, but Carl can't control it at all. Sometimes he even gets very angry because the sandwich doesn't taste good. And when Hulk goes berserk, at most he smashes and smashes, but Hulk is more like a 1 or 2-year-old child. Even if he goes berserk, he rarely actively hurts ordinary people who are not threatening. But Carl, he's more like a ticking time bomb. In addition, once the flame ability is out of control, the target will be the same. In general, Hulk is stronger, but because he doesn't take the initiative to hurt people, he still unconsciously sticks to you and causes more harm. Facing Hill's analysis, Nick Fury understood the subtext in her words. What she means is that Dr. Banner, who can transform into Hulk, can join the Avengers Alliance team. But Rage's fickle Carl doesn't suggest him to join. And even if he wants to join, I'm afraid the Avengers reserve team will not allow a teammate like him. Alright, let's put this matter aside for the time being and let the researchers in Tahiti observe Carl more. By the way, find a time to arrange it, let me meet with Sue. No problem. What's the purpose? Spend 30 million to buy 5 grams of metal hydrogen. Listening to Hill asking about the purpose, Nick Fury leaned back on the chair and said, since eradicating Hydra and pushing the Skrulls pretending to be Alexander Pierce as a scapegoat. Without Pierce, a channel of communication with the World Security Council, it is becoming more and more difficult to allocate funds over there. And each appropriation has to be stuck for a long time. This is not acceptable. We have to figure out a way. As he said that, Nick Fury looked at Hill and said, so, it shouldn't be too much for us to spend 30 million to buy 5 grams of metal hydrogen from Sue, and then reimburse 300 million to the World Security Council. Not much. I don't think it's a big problem to reimburse 500 million. After all, even SHIELD can't use water to compress metal hydrogen, and besides Sue, no one in this world can produce metal hydrogen. So, for 5 grams, we can completely reimburse the World Security Council for around 500 million United States dollars. If you're lucky, maybe you can get it even if it's 700 million. After all, this is a unique bet. In Los Angeles, somewhere in a seemingly ordinary street. Wearing a hat and holding coffee, he is sitting on a table outside the coffee shop drinking coffee like an ordinary passerby. Why do those who deal in arms always choose warehouse? Isn't it more conspicuous? Looking around while holding a cup of coffee, it's like a college student who just had a vacation. Wanda asked, casually, into the headset. I have to say that 17-year-old Wanda has really grown up at the moment. With a height of 1.7 meters and that beautiful and charming face. And the unique sense of youth and beauty at the age of 17 or 18, it looks like a beautiful landscape no matter where you go. Definitely, no one would have thought of such a seemingly weak and beautiful girl. Will actually be a member of the Avengers reserve team. No one even thought that such a beautiful girl is actually a very powerful owner of Crimson Magic. Generally speaking, Small-scale firearms and ammunition transactions are often settled directly on the street. In the headset, listening to Wanda's question, Natasha Romanoff smiled and answered his younger sister. The normal distribution of Wujing in the mains is usually purchased in the gun shop. But this group of people took the weapon route of Hammer Industries. Hammer Industries. Is that the Justin Hammer who was interviewed 2 days ago and deliberately danced in front of the Rubik's Cube Tony Stark in front of the media? Yes, that's him facing Wanda. Natasha Romanoff did not hesitate to teach her what to do, since the weapon manufacturing department of Stark Industries was permanently closed by Tony. There is a vacancy in the International Arms Channel. As Hammer Industries, which has been suppressed by Stark Industries, it thinks this is a good opportunity. I want to take advantage of Tony's decision, and then win the order that originally belonged to the Stark Weapon Manufacturing Department. It's just that Hammer Industries and Stark Industries are not in the same level at all, whether it's popularity or weapon development and so on. So what does that have to do with today's deal? Putting down the coffee cup, Wanda asked softly. The seller is going through the channel of Hammer Industries. In fact, in addition to the normal weapons orders, Hammer Industries also has some private orders. Definitely this is a shady deal. But on the arms dealer's side, the so-called shady transactions have become a means of making money that everyone knows well. For example, when Obadiah Stein was in charge of Stark Industries, there were actually these invisible private orders. It's just that even Obadiah Stein only dares to sell weapons to those who are making attacks in other regions, and he dare not sell weapons to those who are preparing to make attacks in the homeland. But those guys from Hammer Industries dare to do anything for money. This is one of the reasons why Hammer Industries has never been able to keep up with Stark Industries. Speaking of this, Natasha Romanoff smiled while pressing the headset. So, Wanda, since you want to join the reserve team of the Avengers Alliance, then this will be your first test. The task this time is to destroy this arms transaction, and catch both parties who buy and sell weapons. Prevent the outflow of weapons from causing large-scale damage. When necessary, you can directly deprive them of their lives. Remember, safety is always the first priority in tasks like this. After all, only when a person is alive can he be a guest doctor. This is Wanda's first mission. As an older sister, Natasha Romanoff naturally wants to tell Wanda some of her own experience, code of conduct and so on. Even last night I double-checked with Wanda to let her know what she can do and what she should do. But when the task was about to be carried out, Natasha Romanoff was still a little worried about Wanda's safety. Therefore, compared to the success of the mission, what Natasha Romanoff values more is that her sister must not encounter danger or even be injured during the mission. That's different from what you taught me last night. Listen to Natasha Romanoff, put your own safety first. Wanda lifted the corner of her mouth and took a sip of coffee. Tisk. The coffee in this cafe is far worse than the coffee in Tahualan. It's normal. After all, how can such a small street shop be compared with Sultan's coffee shop in the best part of Manhattan? But then again, what about Sue? Your first mission, what is he doing as a boyfriend? Here he is. Listening to Natasha Romanoff's question, Wanda turned her head and looked not far away, and her boyfriend who also wore a hat smiled. If he is by my side, then the target is too obvious. After all, everyone knows that he is the famous Silver Moon Knight. If you sit with me, then my identity will be exposed. Air. Natasha Romanoff hovers above with a Quinjet fighter jet. Hearing Wanda mention Su Che, her tone of voice was unconsciously cheerful. Natasha Romanoff also laughed. I said why he left the house yesterday, so he came here to help you stand up. That's right. After all, this is your first mission. I'm afraid Subi cares about you. As he spoke, he looked at the picture displayed on the Quinjet fighter. Natasha Romanoff said to Wanda, Wanda, get ready, the target has appeared. Ground. Listening to Sister Natasha Romanoff's words in the headset, Wanda glanced across the street from the corner of her eye. A group of people swaggered into the warehouse, leaving only 2 young brothers standing at the door. So he smiled and said, got it. He put down the coffee cup and handed the money to the waiter. Wanda lowered the brim of her hat and walked across the street towards the warehouse that was trading. I already know the internal structure of this warehouse in advance, and I have my own boyfriend as a follow-up. So even Wanda, who was on a mission for the first time, didn't feel nervous at all. Just across the street, before arriving at the warehouse door, the 2 little brothers who had stayed outside to let the wind out to prevent the police from getting caught saw Wanda walking towards this side. Walking over like this swaggeringly, under normal circumstances, it is not the style of a cop or the FBI at all. So these 2 little brothers didn't care at all. Instead, looking at Wanda's beautiful face and tall figure, a wicked smile flashed in his eyes. It's really a disgusting look. Wanda, who has always been very sensitive to eyes, frowned subconsciously, and then a trace of crimson magic energy appeared on her fingertips. There was hardly any hesitation, and in an instant, he started to zoom in on these two brazen boys. Air. Seeing that Wanda was within 2 or 3 meters away, he immediately started to zoom in, and immediately lifted the two young men who were venturing out with magical energy and threw them into the warehouse. Natasha Romanoff shrugged, but said nothing. After all, it is not for the purpose of investigating secrets and obtaining information quietly. So how to get in is to get in, and it is also a good choice to get in. I have to say, Wanda's move is really reckless. But in fact, just relying on these few things, it's really not worth thinking about. And this is his first battle, and also his first test. So Wanda felt that it was natural to do something beautiful. You can't embarrass your boyfriend inside the warehouse. The two parties who were trading were suddenly disturbed by a loud noise from the door. Subconsciously raised the weapon and pointed it at the door. I saw the two younger brothers who were wrapped in crimson magic fall in. Then, a tall and beautiful woman appeared in front of everyone without any fear at all. Hey, boys. You guys are surrounded by me. I'll give you a chance. Put down your weapons and surrender now. Looking at Wanda, who came empty-handed, she was standing alone at the door of the warehouse. The people present with weapons burst into loud laughter in an instant. Who would be afraid of the threat of an unarmed woman? Especially since these people like myself are all strong men holding various firearms. Originally, when I heard the movement, I thought it was because of FB or being hacked. As a result, that's it. Damn, stop laughing. Among the crowd, one of the leaders immediately pointed his gun at Wanda. There was a lot of noise just now, maybe this will attract the state police. Take care of her quickly and leave immediately. As he said that, the guy in the lead didn't have any thoughts of pity. Raise your weapon and point it directly at Wanda and start pulling the trigger. Bang bang bang. After a few shots, the expected scene of Wanda being shot and falling to the ground did not appear. Instead, the bullet was frozen in front of Wanda. Seeing this scene, the people who were still laughing suddenly stopped smiling. This woman in front of me is no ordinary person at all. It really is. As the bullet fell to the ground, Wanda instantly burst into a burst of crimson magic energy. The bright red magical energy is like lines, constantly attacking the group of guys holding weapons. The traders who were hit by the magic energy all flew out uncontrollably. Seeing this scene, some people raised their weapons and started shooting at Wanda without any hesitation. It's just that the bullets hit Wanda's side, but they were all blocked by the magic barrier. For a moment, Wanda looked like a kite flyer, constantly throwing the guy tied by the kite string into the air. As someone who gets along with Suche day and night, Wanda always kept her boyfriend's words in mind. The magician should fly a kite from a distance, instead of holding a dagger and attacking the enemy in melee. He can fly again, and he can use the magic barrier to block bullet attacks. You can also use crimson magic to bind the enemy, or even solve the enemy. In this case, if you hold a dagger and fight the enemy in close quarters, you are a fool. Above the warehouse, Suche, who did not know when to appear, has been paying attention to every move in the warehouse. For a dozen strong men with guns and weapons, Yin wasn't worried that Wanda couldn't handle it. What he is more concerned about at the moment is if someone uses weapons of mass destruction, such as rockets and the like. Will Wanda kill without hesitation? After all, the Avengers are a righteous team known for protecting the Earth. But in fact, more is to protect those ordinary people. Once these guys use weapons like rockets to attack, the explosion will inevitably hurt many innocent people. In this case, crushing it directly to death is the most correct choice. Controlling the crimson magic, Wanda firmly tied up the first few guys who attacked him without any hesitation. When I saw a guy hiding in the corner pick up a shoulder-fired rocket launcher from the box, Wanda's expression suddenly turned serious. Unknowingly, the magic in his hand turned into a slap-sized arrow in an instant, stabbing at the guy who was about to launch the rocket without any hesitation. Whoosh! The energy of the red magic arrow pierced through the air, piercing the head of the guy carrying the bazooka at extreme speed. This is the ice arrow created by my boyfriend using the magic of the water system. Wanda is very familiar with this, so one of the offensive magic subconsciously used as the crimson arrow. After the guy fell down, his fingers directly pulled the trigger. Boom! With a loud noise, the rocket directly broke through the quiver and flew over the warehouse. Seeing this scene, his big expression instantly became a little ugly. One of the mandate rules is that no harm should be done to those civilians. Once this rocket explodes, it will inevitably affect the surrounding residential areas. That mission has failed. It seemed that it was about to hit the ceiling of the warehouse, but in the next second the arm-length rocket stopped immediately. Subconsciously turned his head to look, only to find that his boyfriend Suche appeared at the warehouse at some time. Looking at this rocket, Su-Che just gave a cold look. Under the launch of psychokinesis, the rocket bombs instantly shattered. There was a rumbling explosion, but it only formed a small group of flames, and then dissipated away. Watching her boyfriend help him deal with the flying rocket, Wanda stuck out her tongue quietly, and then tied up the group of guys without holding back her hands without any hesitation. Even because they didn't want to hear the voices of these bastards, the magic directly blocked the mouths of these guys. Well, after all, I haven't practiced the Dark Divine book yet. So the ability to make Black Bat King's mouth disappear with just one sentence. Wanda hasn't been unlocked yet. After tying up the group of guys, Wanda walked over to her boyfriend and smiled. So honey, my mission failed? Not at all. Listening to Wanda's inquiry, Su-Che glanced at the guy whose head was pierced by the factory doctor. No other bad reactions to discovering Wanda. Only then did Su-Che feel a little relieved. It's not considered a mission failure, after all. Even members of the Avengers Alliance will choose to help each other more often. No matter how strong a person is, it is difficult to do everything. And this is the first time you have faced a mission alone. To capture so many people alive, to be able to do this is already perfect. Listening to what her boyfriend said, Wanda just laughed. He stepped forward and took his future husband's arm and said, I would have stopped talking so much nonsense when I first entered the door. After all, when watching a movie, I always feel that the protagonist comes in front of the villain, and he feels very handsome when he says, you are surrounded by me, to all the villains alone. That's why I wanted to reenact it just now. Having said that, I looked at my boyfriend's concerned eyes. Wanda looked at the corpse on the ground again, and instantly understood what her boyfriend meant. Hey, it's okay honey. Following Su-Che's gaze, Wanda smiled and said, don't treat me like an ordinary 17-year-old girl. Don't forget my dear, Pietro and I used to be part of the Hydra base in Sokovia. Although I haven't killed anyone with my own hands before, I have seen many corpses. So don't worry I'm going to be scared, or have nightmares or anything like that. Hearing what Wanda said, Su-Che nodded. After looking outside, he said to Wanda, let's go, the four sides are almost here. Smiling and nodding, Wanda took Su-Che's arm and left the warehouse together. A few minutes later, when a state trooper car came to the warehouse door and rushed in. I saw a lot of weapons used for trading scattered on the ground. And those weapon traders are being bound here by Crimson Energy at this moment. Although the headed sheriff has experienced many scenes. But this is the first time I have seen such a magical scene. But thinking of what the chief said when he came, the sheriff ordered his men to take the group of people away. One by one, the arms dealers were pulled up from the ground and handcuffed. The crimson magic energy bound to them also began to disappear. Sir, these guys. It was stopped by the Avengers, so it's no surprise. Before his subordinates could finish speaking, the sheriff put his gun back into the pouch and said to his subordinates, if the Avengers are willing to shoot at any time, then the pressure on us will be relieved a lot. Avengers. Hearing what the sheriff said, the young police officer looked around regretfully. It's a pity we came late, sir, otherwise, I really want the signature of the Silver Knight. Oh. I also want the autograph of Captain Rogers, you know he was my childhood idol. Hearing what his subordinates said, the sheriff motioned to escort the prisoners to the car as soon as possible. After the escort was almost gone, the sheriff said, but it's not impossible. After all, I heard from the chief some time ago that we are likely to go to New York for some training. Although it doesn't matter whether I participate in this kind of training or not, I will still go. Because everyone knows that Silvermoon Knight's cafe is across from the Stark Industrial Building, and Captain Rogers and Silvermoon Knight have a great relationship. Maybe, I can use this to get Captain Rogers' autograph. Having said that, the elderly sheriff patted his pocket. There, but the rarest collector's edition, Captain Rogers' card. Alright. In fact, I didn't see the members of Avengers, it's really a pity. After all, I heard from the director that this time is the time for the members of Avengers to solve this matter. I immediately led the team to rush over, just to see if I could get the signature I wanted. But it doesn't matter if you don't see those great superheroes. At least, I still have a chance. At the same time, New York, Su-Che's Ta Hualan Kappa copyright C. Wanda's assessment has passed. Looking at the message notification, Steve raised his head and smiled at Sam who was sitting opposite him, who was very excited about the opportunity to join the Avengers Alliance reserve team. The next thing is the assessment between you and James Rhodes. Don't worry, Captain, I will definitely pass the assessment and join the Avengers Alliance reserve team. He clenched his fists confidently. For Sam, being able to personally get recruited by Captain Steve Rogers. My God, is there anything more fortunate than this? Actually, don't be too nervous. Seeing Sam's excited look, Steve smiled. After all, The reason why the Avengers Alliance was established in the first place was to ensure the safety of the Earth. Abilities file size may be one aspect, but more importantly, it is to have a righteous heart. You are different from Rhodes and Wanda. Wanda is something we watched growing up, so her assessment is more like a simple test. And after passing the test, some training is required. After all, Avengers is different from other teams. I understand this. Listening to what Captain Rogers said, Sam stirred the coffee in front of him very seriously. No matter what, Captain, I will definitely not let you down. The other side. TCH, isn't this the Joker? Watching the TV, I am constantly being interviewed at the moment, not only imitating my tone of voice and actions. He even thought about imitating Justin Hammer, who danced in front of the camera. Tony Stark directly pressed the pause button with the remote control, and then said to Rhodes, "This idiot just wants to get attention, so he doesn't even want his face. Is he my fan? Imitate me everywhere. I feel that having such a fan will lower my identity." Listening to Tony's shameless words, Colonel James Rhodes held champagne and said speechlessly, "You used to be like this, and in fact you are even worse than him." The voice fell, and he looked at Tony without saying a word, just staring at himself like this. Rhodes could only shrug his shoulders and said, "Well, when it comes to the charm of the camera, you are indeed more attractive than him, and his poor imitation is more like a Joker. It's just Tony, don't watch Justin Hammer imitating you everywhere on TV, but he has received a large order from the military. So the stock of Hammer Industries is soaring. Cut." Listening to Rhodes' words, Tony Stark shrugged his shoulders indifferently. It's just a Joker, no matter how fast his value rises, he's still just a Joker after all. What did you say that after the World Expo starts, we will give everyone a surprise? Hey. Forget it. Let's not talk about him. Turning around to look at Rhodes, Tony Stark said seriously, "What are you thinking about the Avengers reserve team?" "I absolutely agree in principle. After all, it's the Avengers, it's a superhero team. And with the Silver Moon Knight and Captain Rogers who is unwilling to jump off the plane, who would not want to join the big family of the Avengers Alliance. But you also know that it's not just me behind me. Sometimes I can't refuse the requests of those big guys behind me. Unless I retire on the spot." Hearing what Rhodes said, Tony Stark nodded understandingly. "Don't worry, I'll say hello to those old guys, and I promise I won't embarrass you." "Just waiting for your words." Seeing Tony's big bag, Rhodes laughed instantly. What greeted him was a ruthless middle finger from Tony Stark. "Shield, Trident Building. Follow Natasha Romanoff into the Trident Tower." It was found that the Trident Building was basically intact, and even the traces of some battles that had taken place here could not be seen. However, there are fewer people, and everyone is acting in a hurry, as if they are usually busy. The rookies from Eagle's Nest are much better. At the elevator door, Natasha Romanoff smiled at Suche while pressing the button of the elevator floor. "You also know that when Hydra was eliminated, S.H.I.E.L.D. lost almost 70% of its people. It is important to know that those who lost, whether they are S.H.I.E.L.D. staff or Hydra staff, all have very rich work experience. But the batch of rookies to make up for the loss has little experience, and only one S.H.I.E.L.D. staff can lead 7 to 10 rookies. So that time is the busiest." Following Natasha Romanoff's words, the elevator doors slowly opened. After the three entered the elevator, Natasha Romanoff continued to laugh. "This is also the reason why I have not left S.H.I.E.L.D., even Steve is still linked to the reason why the action team leader. But it's much better now. At least these rookies have experienced more than half a year and are already familiar with what they should do. In 2 or 3 months, after everything is settled, maybe I can lose weight and leave S.H.I.E.L.D. Hearing what Natasha Romanoff said, Wanda on the side smiled and said, "Natasha Romanoff, you should have left S.H.I.E.L.D. a long time ago. S.H.I.E.L.D. does not lack you alone, but our big family of Avengers Alliance cannot do without you." Looking at Wanda who has grown up, Natasha Romanoff smiled and nodded. "Compared to S.H.I.E.L.D., I really like the big family of Avengers Alliance more. But Wanda, did Pietro tell you which university he's going to go to?" "He said he wanted to be a lawyer, and I bought him some books on law, but he couldn't read them at all. He said that seeing those legal clauses gave him a headache, so now he doesn't know what to do. But judging by his appearance, he still wants to go to college very much. Anyway, I support it. Since I am not planning to go to university, I want to join the Avengers Alliance to help my boyfriend, and I can stay with him every day. Then my younger brother Pietro wants to go to university, so I have to support him. It's just that I can't even read books like law, but I still want to be a lawyer. This is a bit difficult to do. I do know someone." I heard from Wanda that Pietro wanted to be a lawyer, but recently he couldn't see the use of the law. Suche thought for a while, and then said, "If Pietro really wants to be a lawyer, then I will arrange for him to stay with Matthew while he is about to graduate from high school. He is a very good lawyer." Although the law firm has been losing money all year round, the business ability is still good. Matthew? Matthew Murdoch? The blind lawyer? Hearing Su Che mention the name Matthew, Natasha Romanoff thought for a while, then nodded. If it's him, then there should be no big problem. But Sue, you should be able to sense that Matthew Murdoch is not an ordinary person, right? And, in fact, he's also under S.H.I.E.L.D.'s watch. But judging by the character of this guy, if Pietro wants to become a lawyer and stay by his side, then Pietro will definitely be a great lawyer in the future. Natasha Romanoff's last sentence is a pun. What kind of people to follow and what kind of skills to learn? Under the subtle influence, there is a high probability of becoming what kind of person? A guy like Matthew Murdoch, a lawyer who fights for the poor. He is indeed a respectable person. So if Pietro studied with him, then Natasha Romanoff would be much more at ease. As for becoming a lawyer like Matthew, will there be trouble in the future? Ah. Backed by the team of Avengers, do you still care about such a little trouble? Since you all agree, then discuss it with Pietro when you go back tonight. After all, this is about Pietro's life and we cannot make decisions for him. If Pietro agrees, then I'll go and say hello to Matthew. Looking at Natasha Romanoff and Wanda, Su Che said with a smile, the big deal is donating some money to Matthew's law firm that is on the verge of bankruptcy. I had a good chat with him before, he probably wouldn't refuse to have an intern study with him. In fact, Su Che didn't just know Matthew Murdoch. In the more than 3 years since I came to this world, I have also met many people. It's just that many people don't care about it. Like now, after the elevator doors opened. Just in time to see Phil Coulson walking by. Long time no see, Sue, Natasha Romanoff, Wanda, hello. Looking at the 3 people who just came out of the elevator, Phil Coulson greeted them with a gentle smile. It's been a long time, Phil Coulson. Facing Phil Coulson's greeting, Su Che smiled and nodded. It should be almost 8 months. After thinking about carefully, Phil Coulson replied very seriously. Since I was in charge of helping you stay at the Avengers Alliance base in the last New York battle, it seems that I have never seen it again. But the result is still great, at least Loki's conspiracy to rule the Earth was shattered by you superheroes. Listening to Phil Coulson's words, Su Che smiled. How are you doing now? Fortunately, apart from having some nightmares at night, there are no other major issues. But for us S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, no major events are often the best days. After exchanging a few words, Phil Coulson hurriedly took the elevator and left. After Phil Coulson left, Su Che turned to look at Natasha Romanoff. Does he not know that he died and was resurrected? I don't know yet. After all, this matter should be very difficult for him to accept. However, because of this, Nick gave him a brand new mission, and because he was a little worried about him, even Melinda May, who turned into a civil servant, formed a team with him. Saying that, Natasha Romanoff pointed to the front office. That's Nick Fury's office, where he has been waiting for us for a long time. 5 grams, 30 million? He picked up the coffee cup on the table and tasted the coffee. Su Che couldn't help but put down his cup and said, it's simple coffee powder again, without even adding sugar cubes or sugar substitute sweeteners. By the way, is S.H.I.E.L.D. already stingy to this extent? Facing Su Che's pun, Nick Fury laughed. He knew that Su Che said on the surface that S.H.I.E.L.D. is too stingy, and even the coffee for entertaining guests is brewed coffee powder, not freshly brewed coffee. In fact, let me say it again, the price I gave is too low. No way. Since the battle between S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra ended, the World Security Council's allocation of funds to S.H.I.E.L.D. has been stuck again and again. So adhering to the principle of saving what can be saved, coffee is already considered very good, and I even want to only provide ice water to employees. However, for the sake of the work efficiency of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, I still dismissed this idea. Also, don't you like your coffee without sugar? So you shouldn't care about it. Looking at Su Che, Nick Fury replied with the same pun. People always have some pursuits in life, but the premise of these pursuits is to be able to guarantee a sufficient life. Nick, you should know that if a person doesn't even have the most basic guarantee of life, then he can't have higher pursuits. You can't expect everyone to be Steve, and you can't expect Steve to go hungry and fight aliens every day, can you? Listen to a conversation between Su Che and Nick Fury. Natasha Romanoff suppressed a smile, turned to talk to Wanda about something. Although I am an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., I am also a member of Avengers. Therefore, it is best not to get involved. Moreover, it is actually more on Su Che's side. Okay, you make an offer. Seeing Su Che, Nick Fury spread his hands and laughed. I will not let Steve fight aliens hungry. After all, I have also been promoted little by little from the battle. I know that only the most basic living conditions and foundations of soldiers can be guaranteed. In order for the soldiers to fight the aliens for the sake of the Earth. I make an offer. Listening to Nick Fury's words, Su Che glanced at the coffee cup on the table. That's 1 gram of $100 million. Don't think that this is very high. You must know that metal hydrogen is a metastable substance, and no second person in the world can produce it. The most important thing is that once you have the substance of metal hydrogen, its effect is no different from the birth of the first steam engine back then. I think you should know that, right, Nick? In addition, this is the final offer, no counter offer. Listening to Su Che's words, the metal hydrogen that he intends to use to defraud the World Security Council will cost $100 million. Nick Fury suddenly had a headache. There is no way, when there is only one person in the whole world who owns this extremely precious thing. Then when it cannot be snatched or forced, how to quote is definitely up to the treasure holder. The problem is that more than 100 million per gram is the quotation I am going to give to the World Security Council. If Su Che is really given such a price, then S.H.I.E.L.D. won't be able to earn much. Seeing Nick Fury lost in thought, Su Che was not in a hurry. Instead, he picked up the cup of coffee that he disliked and drank it. On the other hand, Hill nodded to Nick Fury, expressing his agreement with Su Che's final offer. Well, although I don't know what Hill is paying attention to. But it's clear that Hill has other plans. After agreeing to Su Che's offer, he took Sue and Wanda to visit the interior of S.H.I.E.L.D. Nick Fury watched Su Che, Natasha Romanoff and Wanda leave. Although this process is constantly testing, can we lower some prices? Well, another heart is as powerful as his strength. Wait until Su Che and the others leave. Maria Hill smiled at Nick Fury. 10 grams of metal hydrogen, $1 billion. In fact, we still have something to earn. How to make money? Listening to Hill's words, Nick Fury asked with a frown. For some missions, or some intrigue, Nick Fury calls himself a master of the field. But for this matter of how to cheat the World Security Council of money, I really don't seem to have much brains. 10 grams of metallic hydrogen, we can give 3 grams to the World Security Council first, and tell them that the mysterious research institute of S.H.I.E.L.D. has found a way to produce metallic hydrogen, and these 3 grams are the finished product. As long as the World Security Council intends to allocate funds, then we can manufacture metal hydrogen in large quantities. At that time, it can even trigger huge amounts of repercussions in the scientific community. It means that once metal hydrogen comes out, the future income that relies solely on energy will definitely exist at the level of hundreds of billions or even trillions. Under such a prospect, especially under the premise that we have produced 3 grams of finished products, the World Security and Management will not worry about them not appropriating funds. Speaking of this, Maria Hill shrugged her shoulders and said, I think the World Security Council is under the prospect of getting 3 grams of finished metal hydrogen samples in the pie we painted. There shouldn't be any problem with appropriating $3 to $5 billion. And after that, listening to Maria's cheating money, after describing the appropriation plan for the grand scene to the World Security Council, Nick Fury's only remaining good eye is starting to shine. As expected, you are my most trusted right-hand man. Sure enough, if you fooled the World Security Council and made big money for them to swindle financing, you are still playing around. After spreading her hands indifferently, Maria Hill said seriously, as long as the appropriation is approved, after a while, whether it is an explosion in the mysterious research institute affiliated to S.H.I.E.L.D., the extremely sophisticated machine and all the materials damaged, or that a large number of scientific researchers sacrificed because of the explosion, isn't that what we say? After all, the explosive power of metallic hydrogen is 30 to 40 times that of TNT. It is extremely normal for violent explosions to occur during the research process. Besides, don't we have 7 grams left? We can use the remaining 7 grams to make business transactions, and maybe we can use these 7 grams again to cheat the World Security Council of funding. Listening to Hill's words, Nick Fury really wants to give Hill a thumbs up. Even before and after, and even defrauding a sum of money can be counted. Sure enough, to deal with the group of guys from the World Security Council, the people they sent here are the most ruthless. If you let Su Che know Maria Hill's plan, I guess I have to give a thumbs up in admiration. Black. So King Black. Sure enough, when it comes to black hearts, you have to be the envoy of S.H.I.E.L.D. In the evening, outside a residential building. Are you sure? Carl is hiding here? Phil Coulson looked at the dilapidated residential buildings in front of him, but there were many households with lights on. Then he asked Melinda May beside her. According to the tracking, after Carl escaped from the laboratory, he hid directly in this residential building. In fact, room 302 on the 3rd floor of this residential building was Carl's home before he joined S.H.I.E.L.D. So it's no surprise that he escaped from the experimental observation room and ran here. Listening to Melinda's analysis, Phil Coulson sighed. Poor Carl. By the way, how many residents are there in this residential building? Arrange for evacuation immediately. Carl's situation is very unstable. I am worried that after he is stimulated, the burst of energy will hurt these ordinary people. Including the rented residents, there are a total of 105 people in this residential building. I have asked people to evacuate these residents without disturbing Carl as much as possible. Speaking of which, Melinda May looked at Phil Coulson. Actually, I'm also worried about Carl, who is extremely emotionally unstable. Once the flame ability breaks out, it will cause massive casualties. I hope everything goes well. Carl was once an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. after all. Unless it is absolutely necessary, I really don't want to kill our former colleagues with my own hands. Especially in a situation like this, when Carl can't control himself. Even though she said so, Melinda May loaded the special pistol very neatly. Residential building, room C of the second room of the Three Kingdoms. Google gurgle. In front of the refrigerator, a middle-aged man with disheveled hair and slightly red eyes was holding a large bottle of water and drinking continuously. After 3 liters of water were drunk by this man named Carl. But immediately took out another bottle from the refrigerator and gulped it down. On the ground, 6 or 7 plastic bottles full of 3 liters were already scattered. Looking at Carl's desire for water, it's like walking without water for several days in the sunny desert. After seeing the clear water source and oasis, I can no longer suppress my desire for water. It's just that no matter how many liters Carl drank, he always felt that thirsty desire in his body continued to spread. Even the lips are cracked. Water. I need water, I need water. The desire for water made Carl's eyes turn red, and his body seemed to keep turning over in the refrigerator uncontrollably. After finding that there was no water in the refrigerator, the irritable Carl tore the refrigerator to the ground, and then rushed to the kitchen. Even he himself didn't see it, but there were scorched palm prints where he pulled the refrigerator down just now. Turn on the faucet and watch the running water rush. Carl didn't care about the cup, just bent down and put his mouth on the faucet and drank in big gulps. As the water flowed from the mouth into Carl's body, the originally red eyes gradually recovered. There was a hint of satisfaction in the expressions. But before Carl continued to gulp down the drink, his extraordinary hearing ability after the experiment allowed him to directly hear the bursts of voices coming from inside the building. Hearing these abnormal noises, Carl's eyes that had regained consciousness instantly became vigilant. Even the pupils began to gradually turn red. Outside. Looking inside the residential building, some residents have already started to go out under the guidance of the agent. Phil Coulson's spirit is always tense. He must not be careless until the end. Once there is any negligence, the damage caused is definitely the last thing he wants to see. But sometimes, the more people are afraid of something, the more something will happen. Oops. Melinda May, who was controlling the drone to monitor Carl, suddenly said something bad. In the picture displayed on the drone, Carl, who had run to the kitchen to pour water, started to burn. Seeing this scene, Melinda immediately pressed the earphones to the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent and said, "Everyone in the building pay attention, immediately take the innocent people around to hide." Before he finished speaking, the third floor directly in front of him started to flicker with fire and live 10 sounds. The huge amounts of explosion resounded in the entire residential building in an instant. Oh hell. Seeing that the explosion happened right in front of his eyes, and even the violent explosion blasted his and Melinda's bodies, he couldn't help but take a few steps back. Phil Coulson exclaimed subconsciously, and his heart began to sink constantly. An explosion like this in a residential building will definitely cause countless damages. Damn it, if I knew this, I would have called those Avengers superheroes over to help. Even during the day, I exchanged a few pleasantries face to face with Silver Moon Knight Suche. After the explosion stopped, Phil Coulson got up quickly, ignoring the raging fire, and ran towards the residential building immediately. Melinda, who got up together, also ran over without hesitation. I rushed to the scene of the explosion as soon as possible and watched the extremely intense scene. Even Phil Coulson and Melinda couldn't help frowning. Ambulance, ambulance, and call for backup immediately. The collapsed residential building was burning with raging fire, and the violent explosion turned the original intact residential building into ruins. Many residents who were too late to evacuate and S.H.I.E.L.D. agents suffered heavy casualties. Even some short-limbed corpses can be seen here and there. Seeing this scene, Phil Coulson scratched his hair in pain. Then, together with the Iron Rider Melinda, they began to pick up the gravel with their bare hands. If you can save one more, save one more. Although, it is very likely that this time, because of the explosion that was so violent that the building collapsed, there will be many casualties. Not long after, with the ambulance and support, and even the nearby police and firefighters rushed over. Phil Coulson, whose hands were already bleeding, sat aside in pain. Disinfect first. Looking at Phil Coulson with a self-blaming and painful expression, Melinda, who also had bloody hands, handed Phil Coulson the special disinfectant spray made by S.H.I.E.L.D. "It's not over yet, it's just the beginning." Forcibly spread Phil Coulson's hands, and May helped Phil Coulson spray disinfectant spray. With a serious expression on one side, he said, "After the explosion, Carl turned into a burning man and flew away from the scene. Next time, we must not keep our hands under illusions. Carl used to be one of us, but now, he is no longer the original Carl." Feel the tingling pain in both hands. Looking at Melinda, who sprayed herself with a special disinfectant spray and asked the rescuers to bandage her hands. Phil Coulson opened his mouth, and finally dropped his head feebly. The voice was a little dry and asked, "This time, how many innocent casualties have been caused? Have you heard? There was an accident last night when Phil Coulson and Melinda were on a mission." Sitting next to Soo-chae, Natasha Romanoff looked at the screen. At the moment Falcon Sam was chasing a prisoner, real-time broadcast screen. Then he said to Soo-chae, "The explosion last night killed 79 people and seriously injured more than 40 people. Among them, more than 20 people are rookie-level agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Deaths outnumber the wounded." Hearing the numbers that Natasha Romanoff said, Soo-chae was a little surprised. This is the first time that the number of dead is greater than the number of injured. But according to Natasha Romanoff's explanation, this is understood. After all, a violent explosion occurred in a residential building, even destroying the entire building. It is normal for the dead to outnumber the injured. If S.H.I.E.L.D. hadn't acted in time to suppress this news, I'm afraid it would have caused great panic. But even if the news is suppressed, the matter is not so easy to handle. It's easy to talk about compensation, but among the more than 70 people, more than a dozen of their families died. Saying so, Natasha Romanoff leaned back in her chair, with her legs crossed on the table. Phil Coulson took a big hit this time. Although it won't make him slump, I'm afraid he will have nightmares every day during this period. But in fact, I am most concerned about Melinda. She was transferred to a civilian job because of the little girl incident. Now that S.H.I.E.L.D. is short of people, she is allowed to appear again. It turned out that the first case encountered such a scene. I was really worried that she would never be able to take the position of S.H.I.E.L.D. agent again." Hearing what Natasha Romanoff said, Soo-chae asked softly, "What do you mean? Our Avengers alliance will take over this matter." "Don't even think about it, it's about S.H.I.E.L.D.'s face. Nick Fury will never hand over this matter to us." Shaking her head slightly, Natasha Romanoff looked at the picture, where Falcon Sam was fighting with the criminal among the crowd. Then he shook his head and said, "If the explosion in the residential building hadn't happened last night, then Nick Fury might have given us that burning man Carl. But right now, with Nick Fury's character, it's absolutely up to S.H.I.E.L.D. to handle it. It's about the face of S.H.I.E.L.D., at least with the World Security Council." Having said that, Natasha Romanoff turned to look at Soo-chae. "By the way, where is Thor? Why haven't I seen him for a while?" "Promise." Pushed the magazine on the table to Natasha Romanoff. On the cover of the magazine, it is Thor holding the red cloak of Mjolnir armor. The title is still Asgard God of Thunder, superhero Thor Odinson who saves the world. What's the situation? Looking at the Thor cover printed in the magazine, Natasha Romanoff looked at Soo-chae with some puzzlement. No one knows how those magazines contacted Thor. After all, I even bought his phone. But the Avengers, after all, saved the world when the Chitauri invaded Earth. So the heat has always been very high. Because of this, after knowing that Thor has plans to make money, those magazines contacted one after another, and the result is just like what you saw." Pointing to Thor's picture on the cover, Soo-chae spread his hands and said, "This is Thor's 7th magazine cover. But the price is not bad. According to Thor, he has earned nearly 400,000 during this time. In his words, just standing there and asking someone to take a photo, you can get more than $50,000, which is really a bargain." I heard Soo-chae say that. In my mind, I imagine Thor standing in front of the light barrier, listening to the photographer's command and posing in various poses. Inexplicably, Natasha Romanoff felt that sense of incongruity was simply too strong. However, looking at the photos of Thor in the magazine, Natasha Romanoff thought it was quite interesting again. After being silent for a while, Natasha Romanoff said to Soo-chae, "So, for making money, this guy Thor probably won't join Broadway or Hollywood." "Probably not." Looking at the photo of the magazine on the table, Soo-chae laughed. "Thor doesn't care about money. What he really wants to make money is to complete the legacy of his deceased girlfriend Doris. Although traveling around the world, he can just fly with a hammer. But Thor always has some weird insistences. For example, he said that it is meaningful to travel in the way of ordinary people, so as to fulfill Doris' wish to see the world. If you rely on your own strength to fly and the like, this is equivalent to cheating, and it's not like appreciating the beauty of the earth from the perspective of Earthlings. Listening to Suche's answer, Natasha Romanoff had a slightly weird expression. After a while, he put his legs up on the table and smiled at Suche. The reason why I asked about Thor just now is because Kay Fury is also worried that Iron Knight Melinda May will have problems again. So Nick Fury sent Melinda to the Eagle's Nest as soon as possible, and asked S.H.I.E.L.D.'s most powerful psychiatrist to help Melinda. And the best and most powerful psychiatrist is named Doris, nicknamed Medusa. Hearing what Natasha Romanoff said, Suche froze for a moment, and then reacted and gave Natasha Romanoff a thumbs up. It's still you, S.H.I.E.L.D., tisk, poor Thor. Well, I finally know what happened to Thor's dead girlfriend for a while. Good guy. Co-authoring makes Thor fall in love with each other. Whenever he mentions Doris, there are countless gentle women in his eyes. It turned out to be an agent of your S.H.I.E.L.D., did you deliberately send someone close? Co-author S.H.I.E.L.D., where can I lie to idiots? Fortunately, I thought it was because Thor was exiled to Earth in advance. So got a girlfriend ahead of Jane Foster. Ah. Well, what you revealed in advance with the black gold diary, you guys just use it like this. But let alone, this trick is quite useful. At least according to Suche's observation, Thor's love for the Earth in at the moment is even more than that in the original movie universe. Yes, Suche didn't know that Doris was nicknamed Medusa, let alone that she was sent by S.H.I.E.L.D. to approach Thor on purpose. After all, even if it is Suche, it is impossible to know all the people in S.H.I.E.L.D., right? Although I had guessed this before, I didn't expect it to be true. Inexplicably feel that Thor is a little pitiful? After all, whenever Thor talks about Doris, the feeling of white moonlight in his heart is very moving every time. I hope Thor doesn't know the truth, or else. Don't worry, Thor won't know. Shrugging his shoulders at Suche, Natasha Romanoff raised his legs again. I don't even know if Doris used her real face when she approached Thor. Medusa, there is more than just a face. Crazy, Captain, this is a madman. He watched as he ran to the downtown area, grabbing an innocent civilian with one hand, and pressing the bomb remote control with the other hand. Falcon Sam held a weapon but did not dare to act rashly. He didn't dare to bet that once he took action to kill the criminal in front of him, then will the bomb on his body explode. Sam, how are you doing over there? Inside the cafe. Sipping coffee leisurely, watching Sam was confronting the group performer. The surrounding people were frightened by this scene and kept running away. Steve Rogers asked in a serious tone while holding a coffee cup. Captain, the criminal is now holding a hostage, and the criminal is still wearing a bomb. I'm worried that if he is captured by force, it will easily cause mass casualties. Listening to Falcon's words, Steve Rogers took a sip of coffee, and then said in a serious tone, Sam, this criminal was originally a heinous criminal. There have been dozens of murders on him, and he cannot be allowed to escape no matter what. Originally, I wanted to do it myself, but I still handed him over to you to capture him as an assessment action to join the Avengers Alliance reserve team. Having said that, Steve took a sip of coffee, then frowned. It's too sweet, it seems that I have done a lot on my behalf just now. Putting down his coffee cup, Steve Rogers looked at the solemn Falcon outside. Sam, this is about whether you can join the Avengers reserve team. So, no matter what, this bloody criminal cannot be allowed to escape. Clear. Listening to Captain Rogers' words, Sam Falcon nodded solemnly. Just looking at the criminals holding innocent people hostage, Falcon's eyes flickered with hesitation. Put down the bomb detonator in your hand, you should know that you have now. Before Falcon Sam could finish speaking, the criminal holding the crowd put his hand holding the detonator to his mouth and made a hissing gesture. Are you trying to aim for my head? While speaking, the criminal stuck his head out from behind the hostage. Look, there is a wall behind me, but I showed my head to you. It was undoubtedly a very stupid move, but would you dare shoot? Oh, I forgot to tell you, the explosion of the bomb is not just a counter-campaign. As he spoke, the criminal threw the detonator directly in front of Falcon's feet, and then rolled up his sleeves to reveal the pulse sticker. The bomb is connected to my heart. As long as my heart stops, the bomb will still explode with a bang. As he spoke, the criminal grabbed the hostage's neck and said to Falcon, Wow, if there is an explosion, the building behind me will probably be blown to ashes. So, are you going to let me go, or arrest me at all costs? Oh, by the way, you don't think I'm the only one who committed so many crimes. As he spoke, the criminal took out a mobile phone from his pocket and threw it over. Taking the mobile phone thrown by the criminal, Falcon Sam looked at the damn guy in front of him suspiciously. The first number, dial it. Although I don't know what the criminal is going to do. But I followed him for 3 days before I could locate his location. During these 3 days, Falcon knew very well that this guy in front of him was definitely a very cunning kind. At the criminal's request, Falcon dialed the first number on his cell phone. As soon as the phone was connected, a male voice with a rough voice came out. "Hey boss, according to your plan, I have kidnapped 30 random hostages on the street, as long as those damned state police dare to arrest you. I immediately posted the video of these 30 hostages online, claiming that if you are not released, a hostage will be randomly executed every 10 minutes. Listening to the words coming from the other end of the phone, Falcon Sam immediately looked at the criminal angrily. "Dude, don't look at me with the kind of eyes that you want to kill. If you dare, then you can kill me at any time. After all, I have already exposed my head to you." With that said, the criminal seemed to resent that Falcon wasn't stimulated enough. He even loosened the neck of the hostage directly and pushed him out. Looking at the hostages who fell to the ground crying, and then used their hands and feet to escape, the criminal said to Sam arrogantly, "Now? I don't have any hostages in my hands anymore, you can kill me anytime." "Damn it. Do you think I dare not?" Taking a step forward with both guns in hand, Falcon looked at the criminal angrily. "Come on, kill me quickly. Damn madman, you are a madman." "Huh? Incompetent and furious. It's really boring." Looking at Sam, who was holding 2 guns but didn't dare to shoot at all, the criminal seemed to shake his head in disappointment. "Besides, the state police in your big cities are really bad. It's been so long. Didn't come." As he said that, the criminal swaggered up to Falcon. "I thought you would arrest me directly. You know, as long as you can arrest me, then you can make meritorious service and be promoted. Unfortunately, I also prepared cyanide to bite down at any time to make my heart stop beating." Listening to the criminal's words, Falcon's pupils shrank instantly. When the criminal walked towards him just now, Falcon really wanted to knock him to the ground and arrest him. After all, he even threw the detonator under his feet. Just looking at him swaggering, arrogant, doesn't seem to care at all. Falcon did not do this for the sake of safety around him. Now it seems that fortunately I had no impulse just now. Damn, this is a man who values his own life and doesn't care at all. Watching the criminal she ran into the car, he even glanced at himself when he started the car. Falcon tightly held the 2 guns in his hands, but in the end he could only watch this guy leave. F*K, 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 F*Ker. After cursing a few times, Falcon looked up at the sun in the sky a little dejectedly. A good one to join the Avengers reserve team, a test and an opportunity to become a reliable teammate of Captain Rogers. I was so easily given up by myself. But, I really dare not gamble with the lives of those ordinary people. Thinking of this, Falcon Sam's mood became even more depressed. "Sorry Captain Rogers, I let you down." Pressing the headset, Falcon Sam said in a low voice. Inside the cafe, listening to Sam's words through the earphones, Steve shrugged. It is indeed quite disappointing. But the disappointment wasn't because Falcon had chosen to let the criminal go. It's because, when I designed this assessment, I deliberately exposed at least 3 flaws that Falcon could discover. It's a pity that Sam was so obsessed with completing the task that he didn't even discover such obvious details. But it doesn't matter, let's teach slowly. At least when he was a teammate, he and Sue gave orders, so he didn't have to worry about him having other thoughts and ideas. Well, from that point of view, maybe not too bad. Uphold the principle of not wasting. Steve picked up the coffee and drank it down in one gulp, which was a bit greasy due to too much sugar. Then he smiled at Falcon Sam, who was frustrated in the headset. "Yeah, the mission failed, but I'm not too disappointed." "No, why, Sam? Why?" "Put away the weapon and listen to the voice of Captain Rogers in the headset." Falcon Sam asked. "The reason is simple, Sam, we never trade lives for lives. Although sometimes, our choice is very simple, it is very necessary to choose to continue in order to complete the task. But often these seemingly simple choices are actually related to the lives of many people. Sam, you need to know why Sue called us to form Avengers. If even we Avengers don't care about the lives of these ordinary people, then even with great strength, it is very sad. Maybe in the future, we will lose in the war against 29 aliens, but we will never give up, let alone trade our lives for lives. Sam, although you have not completed this test, I still want to say that your choice is right. So, welcome to the Avengers reserve team, Falcon Sam, who was still frustrated because he didn't catch the criminal. After hearing Captain Steve Rogers' last words, he clenched his fists excitedly. So this is actually a test, right? Captain Rogers, thank you very much for your recommendation, I think I will not let you down. If you are here, then I will definitely hug you hard. Listening to Falcon Sam's excited tone, Steve sat in the coffee shop and said with a smile, "I'm in the coffee shop, on your left." He turned his head and looked in the direction of the coffee shop on the left side of the street. Sam put away his weapon excitedly and ran over. At the same time, in a small town in Europe, after buying a pack of tomatoes and carrots at the market, Isaac Carr lowered the brim of his hat and turned away in a hurry. Go deep into a small box. Isaac Carl, who was in a hurry, suddenly stopped. Because in front of and behind him, several people have blocked all exits and escape routes. It was really not easy to escape to this remote town in just one night. As expected of the elite of the former SHIELD operation team, but you should know what kind of damage you caused last night. So, do you think SHIELD will let you go? Listen to what the guy in a black suit with a slightly joking tone said in front of him. Carl, who was holding the ingredients, took off his hat irritably, and the ingredients in his hand were also burned with layers of water vapor by the red and hot skin. You are courting death. Hey, calm down, Carl, we don't mean any harm. Seeing that the exposed skin had begun to turn red, it was obvious that Isaac Carl was about to go berserk. The man in the suit at the head said with a smile, on the contrary, we are here to help and save you. Save me. His eyes began to turn red slowly, and Carl threw away the ingredients that had been cooked at high temperature. His tone was irritable but full of arrogance. I have the power of God now, who can do anything to me? If you really possess the power that belongs to the gods, then you wouldn't have fled here immediately after triggering a violent explosion last night, wouldn't you? I think you should also be very clear, perhaps to ordinary people, your power is really like a god. But for the Avengers Alliance, especially the most powerful Avenger in the Avengers Alliance, Su-Che, who is nicknamed the Silver Moon Knight, you are not worth mentioning at all. Judging from the strength he displayed, although you are very strong, in front of him, you are like an ant. That's why you ran away overnight, isn't it? Listen to the words of the leading man in black suit. Although Isaac Carl's eyes were red, he didn't make any rebuttals. Obviously, even he himself knows it very well. I am very strong, but Su-Che is the shoe that decides the fate of the ants. Carl, if you are willing to join us, then we will find a way to help you find the key to controlling and stabilizing your strength. And it can also enhance your strength, allowing you to be promoted from an ant to a shoe in front of the Silver Moon Knight. Definitely, during this period, we will also prevent you from being found and eliminated by SHIELD or Avengers. In return, you just need to help us when we need it. What do you think of such a fair deal? After all, you have nowhere to go now. Listening to the words of the man in black suit, the high temperature on Carl's body gradually disappeared, and his eyes also changed from red to their original color. Who are you? Aren't you afraid of trouble from SHIELD and Avengers? Scared, especially the Avengers, we are naturally afraid, but it's okay if they can't find us. As he said that, the man in black suit took a step forward and reached out his hand to Isaac Carl. I forgot to introduce myself. You may call me Baron, our organization is called AIM, a name you may not be familiar with, but another title, I think you should be very familiar with. That's Hydra. Are you Hydra? Hearing Baron Billy Bernard calling himself Hydra, Isaac Carr instantly became vigilant. Relax my friend, we are very different from those stupid Hydra. In fact, we were originally a member of Hydra, responsible for scientific research. It was only 50 years ago that we had political differences with Hydra. That's why it's 1 and 2 with Hydra. What you have experienced, Hydra represented by Alexander Pierce belongs to the radical faction, who wants to use the Zola algorithm to eliminate those who threaten Hydra. Look. What a stupid idea, the result is of course doomed. As he spoke, Baron Billy Bernard spread his hands and laughed. The biggest difference between us and them is that we are always smarter than them and more sure of what we want. In fact, what we are more interested in is Su-Che, who is nicknamed Silver Moon Knight. If we can study him, then maybe we can discover the true meaning of the human body. Having said that, Billy Bernard glanced at the signal on his watch. Then he smiled at Isaac Carr. SHIELD's pursuit is coming soon, so I think we should get out of here first, what do you think? As a spin-off from Hydra. In fact, for decades, AIM has not given up the ambition of Red Skull John Schmidt. Conquering the whole world, trampling the whole world underfoot has always been the hope of Hydra. Even a company like AIM that specializes in technology as its theme, is actually the same. It's just compared to Hydra headed by Alexander Pierce, who wants to use the Insight Plan to forcibly rule the world. AIM's strategy is much simpler. That is to start changing the world with technology, and then slowly control the world. For example, from energy, from daily life. But since Tony Stark, a playboy, announced the permanent closure of the Stark Industrial Weapons Manufacturing Department. Instead, it turned its attention to the direction of new energy. AIM felt that there was another guy who interfered with their target. Originally, no one in AIM cared about this playboy who suddenly came out to grab food. But when Stark Industries really used the arc reactor to produce lighter, faster and more efficient clean energy, Everyone at AIM knows, if Stark Industries isn't being curbed, then their AIM market will be eroded by Stark Industries sooner or later. At that time, maybe decades of dreams will be broken in half. So with Hydra headed by Alexander Pierce, they started to trouble Stark Industries. After all, although AIM and Hydra led by Pierce have separated, they still have cooperation after all. Otherwise, just like the Hydra base in Sokovia, how was the Hydra base built in other regions? Those technologies are provided by AIM. It's just that no one expected that Stark Industry would not suppress it. Those goddamn aliens have actually invaded. Then, the Avengers dispatched to drive away the aliens, and then became the superhero to save the Earth. By the way, that fellow Tony Stark is also a member of Avengers. All of a sudden, the Stark industry, which had been weakened due to the permanent closure of the weapons manufacturing department, was once again full of vitality. Not to mention the rising stocks, the number of partners in the new energy market has also begun to increase. All of a sudden, it seized a lot of AIM's market. This created a big divide within AIM. The biggest disagreement now is whether to deal with Tony A. Stark. According to the internal high-level meeting of AIM, if we want to continue to accomplish the goal for decades, we will slowly erode from the fullness of science and technology, and finally master various fields of science and technology, so as to achieve the premise of soft domination of the world. Gotta get rid of the damn guy Tony Stark. As long as Tony Stark dies, the Stark industry won't last for many years. But the problem is, the whole world knows about the relationship between this damn guy Tony Stark and that Silver Moon Knight Su-Che. So as long as you want to move Tony Stark, you must first solve the Silver Moon Knight Su-Che. Otherwise, as long as Su-Che is still alive, Su-Che can rush to the scene when Tony Stark is attacked. With Su-Che around, no one can kill Tony Stark. What's more, now S.H.I.E.L.D. has also cleared all the Hydra inside, although it has lost 70% of its power. But even S.H.I.E.L.D., which is only 30% strong, still suppresses some organizations in the dark world from making any rash moves. Tigers are scary, but the injured tiger was even more ferocious. This is known to all organizations in the dark world. Oh. Damn Alexander Pierce, how could this idiot let the Geek Fury he pushed onto the stage with his own hands kill all of them? Even he himself was imprisoned in the cell of the World Security Council? And I heard that Pierce in the cell is also dying of illness. In addition to Nick Fury and Hill, no one knows that Alexander Pierce is dead, and Pierce is imprisoned by the Skrulls. The purpose is to take responsibility for Nick Fury. So, if you want to touch Tanya Stark, you have to get rid of Su-Che first. Also take care of S.H.I.E.L.D. And Su-Che's strength has proved that conventional methods can't solve him at all. That's why Baron Billy Bernard had Carl on his side. The current Burning Man Isaac Carr may not be Su-Che's opponent, but what about the technological transformation and blessing of AIM? Sooner or later there will be a chance. At that time, maybe Isaac Carr, the gene of the Burning Man, can be used to create more Burning Men, and even some other super abilities. Definitely, they actually paid more attention to Su-Che. Originally they had sent someone close to Thor. They even sent some beauties to seduce Thor, and let the third strongest guy in Avengers subtly create a bad impression on the Avengers alliance. Even for their use. But who knew that damned Thor got very close to that woman named Jane Foster? And still remembering a girl named Doris? Depend on. What the hell are you, a god from Asgard, so obsessed with a dead Earth girl? Cooperating with so many people in the world makes you seem infatuated? In any case, AIM, which has been hidden for decades, is not short of patience. One day, they thought they would fulfill the ambitions of the former Red Skull John Schmidt. Well, it would be even better if Su-Che could be caught and researched. Compared to Isaac Carr, Silver Moon Knight, Su-Che is what they care most about. Su-Che, Thor, and Tony Stark definitely don't know. AIM secretly covets or hates them, but even if they knew, these people would not be at peace. After all, the mighty lion never cared about the hatred from the hyena. What's more, in front of Su-Che and the others, AIM can't even count as a hyena. What Su-Che is more concerned about now is Matthew Murdock's evaluation of Pietro. In the past 10 days or so, Pietro has performed very well. Inside an upscale restaurant in New York, Matthew was wearing sunglasses while cutting steak, and smiled at Su-Che and Wanda who were sitting across from him. Definitely, what I'm talking about is very supportive of Tetro's learning ability and love for legal terms. It's his kindness to some vulnerable groups, and the justice he insists on in his heart. Especially when he heard that vulnerable groups were being bullied, he always felt pity and even anger. Actually, this is what I value most about Pietro, if he is willing to stick to it. Then Pietro will definitely become the best lawyer who will not succumb to power and capital. After all, the most important thing for a lawyer is never how much money he makes or how famous he is. Speaking of this, Matthew smiled at Suche. Definitely, here in Hell's Kitchen, an ordinary but righteous lawyer will inevitably suffer a lot of trouble. But I think, with you as his backing, even that guy Jin Bing wouldn't dare touch Pietro at all, wouldn't he? Pietro wants to be a lawyer, but can't read books about law. So it's reassuring to hand him over to Matthew Murdoch, who is known as Daredevil. At least in general, Matthew is still very reliable. Just like now, with a mouthful of cow, put it in your mouth. Suche and Matthew paused at the same time. Raising his hand, Suche prevented Wanda, who was sitting next to him, from cutting the steak. Then Suche beckoned the waiter over. "Hello, Mr. Su, do you have any orders?" The waiter still knows about Suche, the superhero Silver Moon Knight. When the Battle of New York fought against aliens to save the Earth, it didn't bring it up. "Call the chef who made this steak, please." Hearing Suche's words, the waiter froze for a moment. But he nodded quickly. "No problem, Mr. Su, please wait a moment." Watching the waiter leave, Wanda turned to look at her boyfriend and asked, "Honey, is there something wrong with this steak?" Looking at Wanda, Su nodded slightly. On the other hand, Matthew Murdoch said, "It should be a hallucinogen. It is not fatal, but it can cause hallucinations. If the dosage is larger, it will also cause fainting. Generally speaking, the hallucinogens on the market are not as pure as this ingredient added to the steak." Speaking of this, Matthew smiled slightly. "Although I can't see with my eyes, my senses have been enhanced a lot. And as someone who has been a lawyer in Hell's Kitchen all year round, I am still very familiar with drugs like hallucinogens." Listening to Matthew's words, Wanda frowned subconsciously. "So, is it for Matthew in front of you, or is it for your boyfriend?" Soon, the chef and waiter from the back kitchen of the restaurant rushed over. "Hi Mr. Su, I am the head chef here, how can I help you?" Looking at the chef in front of him, Susan gestured to the steak on the table. "Did you cook this steak yourself?" "Definitely, Mr. Su, I marinated and made this steak myself. What's wrong?" Seeing the chef's answer, Wanda waved her hand as if nothing had happened. A crimson magic instantly invaded the head chef's mind. In the next second, the head chef said, "I made this steak by myself from marinating to frying. Although I left for a minute because of some things on the way, I asked my deputy to help fry it for a while. But for the sake of security, and also to thank you for saving the planet from evil aliens, I put a lot of heart into it. Make sure you and your friends have the best steak ever." Listen to the head chef answering his truest thoughts under Wanda's crimson magic. Suche nodded. "Chef, please ask your deputy to come here." Hearing Suche's words, the waiter at the side quickly said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Su, Chef Bob's deputy asked for leave after finishing making the steak this time. It's been about 10 minutes since I left, and what do you know about Chef Bob's deputy?" "This deputy was handpicked by me." As the head chef, Bob replied very seriously. "I personally assessed him when he came to apply for the job half a month ago. According to the rules, he should start with the most basic kitchen. However, his love for the chef industry made me promote him as an adjutant. By the way, his name is Alan West." Hearing the head chef mention the deputy's name, Wanda took out her phone and sent a text message. "Okay, Mr. Bob, please. You're welcome. I wish the three of you a happy meal." After watching the waiter and head chef leave, Suche continued to eat the steak in front of him. At the same time, he handed the grilled lobster meat to Wanda. "Eat this, there are no hallucinogens in this." On the other hand, Matthew also cut up the steak in front of him and ate it. Hallucinogens have no effect on Suche, or any toxin has no effect on Suche. Similarly, hallucinogens did not have much effect on Matthew. While eating the lobster meat handed over by her boyfriend, Wanda glanced at the reply received on her phone. Then he said to his boyfriend, "Honey, according to the name that the chef said, this person named Alan West is using a fake name." Guessed. Passing the dipping sauce to Wanda, Suche laughed. From the fact that he left here in a hurry 10 minutes ago, it's obvious that he did it on purpose. But only hallucinogens were used, not deadly poisons like cyanide. This should be a warning, or a reminder. I don't know exactly what he wants to remind, but I will know when I find him. After taking a bite of lobster meat, I can feel the Q-bomb meat constantly jumping in my mouth. The corners of Wanda's mouth raised slightly, and then said, "Natasha Romanoff has already searched for this picture of Hua Mingwei and Alan West, and it has been added to the database. It shouldn't be long before we can find his trace through the satellite matrix." After a well-fortified dinner, Matthew bid farewell to Suche and Wanda and then left in a taxi. Back in the car, Wanda glanced at the phone, and then said to her boyfriend, "Honey, is this man named Alan West coming for you, or is he coming for that lawyer Matthew?" If it's coming after him, is Pietro in danger? It should be directed at me. He turned sideways and stretched out his hand to fasten Wanda's seatbelt. After starting the car, Su-Che smiled while driving towards the Avengers Alliance base. By the way, how is the control of Pietro's ability going? Well enough. He folded his arms and leaned on the back of the co-pilot's seat relaxedly. According to Pietro, he didn't expect that one day he would have the same ability as the Flash in the comics. I just don't know if his speed can break through the speed of sound, or even the speed of light. However, Pietro is not prepared to show this strength. He wants to become a lawyer more than a superhero who saves the world. Well, just think of what my boyfriend wrote in the Black Gold Diary. Pietro will die because of this ability. Wanda felt anxious for a while. She felt that she could never bear the pain of losing her only brother. So no matter what, I will never let Pietro join the Avengers. Absolutely not. Kneel before your king. Looking at Hela in front of him, Thor raised the hammer in his hand and was about to throw it, but was stopped directly by Loki. Loki. Thor was about to get angry when he saw Loki suddenly raised his head. Damn it, Mobius, you chose the wrong time. As Loki's voice sounded, the next second the space seemed to stand still. Then a portal similar to a mirror appeared. After seeing this portal, Luigi drilled in without any hesitation. Kala, in the Time Administration. Loki rested on his knees and let out a long sigh of relief. Please, can you be more reliable next time? After just appearing out of thin air, I almost missed Hela's kick. Hold on. Sorry, I didn't expect this to happen. Watching Loki with his knees and eventually even sitting straight on the ground. Mobius said apologetically, leave that alone. Sitting in the passageway of the Time Administration, Loki leaned against the wall and said to Mobius, this world is very strange. Although I have indeed discovered another Loki's aura according to your introduction. But this world is different from what I imagined. Although there are still Avengers, the Avengers in this world don't have Sue. Instead, there are many more guys that I have never heard of before. And what is Tony Stark wearing? White armor. And that face is not the Tony Stark I know. Most importantly, he also developed Extremis, which can make people handsome and beautiful. Having said that, Loki raised his head and looked at Mobius suspiciously. I seriously suspect that all of you are being deceived. The so-called parallel universe does have the same people, but they are different in terms of personality, appearance, and even choices. Different choices create different fates, and I even suspect that what you have seen to me, those fates that originally belonged to Loki, are actually just a few regular Locus. That's all. Having said that, Loki grabbed Mobius' extended hand and stood up from the ground. After turning around and looking around, he said to Mobius, and just as I guessed, the Time Management Bureau is actually a scam. Believe me, Mobius, maybe Loki and Mobius in the other world made the extremely outrageous choice in your eyes just because they saw through the tricks of the Time Administration. Listening to Loki's words, Mobius was silent for a while. Actually, ever since Mobius in that parallel world did a series of things, I noticed something was wrong. But, if the Time Management Bureau is a trick to deceive people, what do we people represent? Loki, regardless of whether time management is a trick or not, I hope we can solve the current problem first. Looking at the sincere eyes of Mobius, Loki raised his hand helplessly. How can this guy not listen? I really don't want to participate in this muddy water anymore. Wouldn't it be nice to go back to Asgard and watch the drama and eat some fruit this time? By the way, isn't the Time Administration very afraid of Su-Che? Maybe I should think of a way to bring Sue in. At the same time, Earth. Tony, what's wrong with you? Looking at the sudden flushing, the whole person was a little shaken and couldn't stand still. Pepper, who was having dinner together, hurried forward to support Tony Stark and let him sit on the sofa. Jarvis analyzed Tony's status immediately. As soon as Peebo's voice fell, Tony resisted the feeling of spinning in his mind, and immediately said to Jarvis, no, Jarvis, contact Sue, immediately. Sir, I have already contacted Mr. Sue, and at the same time analyzed that you should have taken hallucinogens. Ms. Pepper, please give Mr. Stark a glass of ice water, which can relieve Mr. Stark's condition a little bit. Hearing what Jarvis said, Peebo hurried to the refrigerator to take out a bunch of ice cubes and put them in the glass, then took a large glass of ice water and brought it over. Gouda, Gouda. After receiving the ice water from Pepper, Tony Stark gulped down the ice water. The whole person was paralyzed on the sofa with his eyes closed, and his breathing was still very rapid. Ms. Pepper, please calm down. Mr. Stark is trying to stay clear. The effect of hallucinogens is very strong, but the harm to the body is very small. Once Mr. Stark has survived this period, all he needs is a restful sleep to recover. Aware of Peepo's panic, Jarvis immediately comforted him. Hearing the comfort from Jarvis, Peepo was a little relieved. Reaching out to hold Tony's hand, the other hand kept raising Tony to wipe the sweat from his forehead. Today's dinner is made by myself. How could it be possible to be poisoned with hallucinogens? However, since Tony was in such an urgent life and death moment, the first thing he thought of was to contact Suche. Not Steve or Rod, or anyone else from the Avengers Alliance. From this point, it is not difficult to see how much Tony trusts Sue. 2 minutes later, as the balcony window was opened by Jarvis, Suche flew in directly from the balcony. Seeing Suche rushing here quickly, Pipo finally breathed a sigh of relief. It's like seeing the backbone after seeing Suche. He quickly said what happened just now. Listening to Pipo's narration, Suche stepped forward to look at Tony, who closed his eyes and gritted his teeth, as if he was fighting his illusion again. Then he raised his hand and a tinge of orange psychic magic poured directly into Tony's mind. After a while, taking a long breath of relief, Tony Stark slowly opened his eyes. Regardless of the sweat all over his cheeks, he said to Suche weakly, "I almost thought I saw God just now. Damn, I just saw my dad fighting Batman in Joker's costume. Damn it, it's scarier than meeting God. But if it does happen, then maybe I should be on Joker's side." Looking at Tony, who was still thinking about joking, Suche sat on the sofa. "You have also been tricked. It seems that this time, someone is coming after us again." Also, hearing Suche mention it, Tony supported his arms and sat up from the sofa. "Who else?" "And me, except that hallucinogens don't do anything to me, not even poison of any kind." Speaking of which, Suche just wanted to continue talking about the assistant chef of the restaurant. But looking at Tony with sweat all over his face. But Suche said, "You should rest first, Tony, let's talk about something tomorrow." Early in the morning, a ray of sunlight shone on the shutters. Mottled light spots shine on the white quilt through the blinds. Tony Stark, who had slept all night, slowly opened his eyes. The first thing I saw was Pipo, who was sitting beside the bed and squinting at the moment. Last night Tony took hallucinogens, although nothing life-threatening. But that situation was too scary. Even though Suche came over, Pipo was still a little worried. So he sat on the chair and kept watching Tony with his clothes on. It wasn't until early in the morning that I fell asleep on the bed in a daze. Looking at Pipo, who was lying on the bed at the moment, Wang Ni stretched out his hand and stroked Pipo's hair with some distress. This suddenly woke up Pipo. Seeing that Tony regained consciousness, Pipo breathed a sigh of relief. "Are you awake? Tony, is there any discomfort in your body now?" 437. "I'm fine." Seeing Pipo's concerned eyes, Tony Stark sat up from the bed, raised his arms and deliberately pretended to be very muscular. "I am a majestic Iron Man, Tony Stark. How could a little hallucinogen be so powerful? Affect me? Get up from the bed, and let Pipo lie on the bed to rest. You are not allowed to go to work in Stark Industry today. Take a good rest for a day. I'll make breakfast for you, and sleep peacefully for a while after eating breakfast." As he spoke, Tony kissed Pipo lightly on the forehead. "You worked hard last night. It's good that you're fine." Smiling at Tony, Pipo relaxed his heart a little, then closed his eyes and prepared to squint for a while. She covered Pipo with a quilt very thoughtfully. Tony left the room slowly with light steps, and closed the door very intimately. In the living room, he looked at Suche, who finished washing and was watching the news at the moment. A smile appeared unconsciously on Tony's face, and then he made a funny voice. "Wow, you're sitting here so early in the morning. Busy man. I thought you'd make breakfast for me. At the very least, let me make a cup of coffee." Seeing Tony's funny look, after knowing that he had nothing to do, Suche gave him a middle finger without looking back. This is not the greatest genius of this century, billionaire, philanthropist, inventor, superhero who saves the world, the most loyal friend of Silver Moon Knight Suche, Iron Man Tony Stark. Tisk, by the way, a superhero with so many titles has the nerve to ask the guest who helped you 3 times last night to cook breakfast for you. Kong Mang, if this matter gets out, I think the stock of Stark Industries will drop rapidly. The assets have shrunk severely. The character design is broken, Tony. Come on buddy, if it's someone else, forget it. What's wrong with you and me? Listening to Suche's teasing, Tony Stark drank a glass of ice water and said, "Please, I'm so hungry that I can eat a cow now." By the way, as Iron Man Tony Stark's most loyal friend, the great Silver Moon Knight really didn't prepare breakfast for me, even if this is my home. Turning off the TV with the remote control, Suche turned his head to look at Tony, who had slept through the night and his hair was a little frizzy. Then he pointed in the direction of the bathroom. "Hurry up and wash up, breakfast will be delivered in a while." "No problem." Blinking at Suche, Tony Stark smiled and said, "As expected, you are the most caring. Get out." He raised a middle finger at Tony. How can this guy be so angry? Oh, you're a changed man. You ain't what you used to be. Geez, that's just so sad. Clutching his heart and pretending that you were too cruel, Tony Stark sighed while walking towards the bathroom. Resisting the urge to smash the sofa cushion in his hand, Su-Che looked at Tony's back and shook his head speechlessly. This showman. After a few minutes, after Tony washed up, breakfast was delivered. Looking at the breakfast in front of him, he twisted and gave Su-Che a questioning look. After seeing Su-Che's reassuring look, Tony finally delivered a breakfast to Peepo in the bedroom with peace of mind. Then he walked out and said to Su-Che, Peepo watched over me last night, so I plan to sleep for a while after having breakfast in the bedroom. Generally speaking, when there are guests, the hostess even eats breakfast in the bedroom. This is a very disrespectful thing. But now, neither Su-Che nor Tony Stark think so. After all, the relationship between Su-Che and Tony Stark has long been beyond ordinary friendship. From the time Tony took the hallucinogen last night and maintained the last bit of sobriety, the first time he asked Su-Che to see it. And Peepo also knew this, so he didn't come out. Otherwise, try another person. Peepo would never make such a faux pas. Huh? Why do you feel so angry when you say that? Well, it must have been infected by that bastard Tony. The man has been caught. While eating breakfast, Su-Che said to Tony, the deputy in the restaurant last night gave me hallucinogens for dinner. Although he chose to escape, he was given by S.H.I.E.L.D. before he escaped from New York. Got it. As for what happened to you last night, someone used hallucinogens on the raw materials of the food. It's not the same person, but they didn't run away. Hearing what Su-Che said, Tony Stark nodded slightly. After taking a sip of breakfast, Tony suddenly raised his head and said to Su-Che, Dude, do you know what that strong hallucinogen made me see last night? See what? Looking at Tony, Su-Che raised his head. Did you see your dad fighting Batman in Joker's costume? No, this is what I said to deliberately adjust the atmosphere in front of Peepo, so as not to worry about her. Looking at Su-Che, Tony Stark looked very serious. I seem to have seen the truth of the universe. Hearing what Tony Stark said, Su-Che put down the food in his hands and motioned for Tony to continue talking. Sitting opposite Su-Che, Tony Stark also put down the food in his hand. I don't know if this is a hallucination, but I did see a lot of incredible things. There are many Avengers, many. Although the members of the Avengers Alliance all look different, what happened in the early stage is similar. Such as Steve was frozen, such as I was kidnapped into a cave. It's just that some of me are wearing white battle armor to develop a program that can control people, and some of me are lying drunk and lying in the Stark Industrial Building, looking decadent. Also, I became the kind of zombie in the movie, including other Avengers members who all became zombies. Speaking of this, Tony Stark breathed a sigh of relief. I don't know if this is the effect of hallucinogens, but it is very real, and all I see are very real scenes. In addition, it is worth mentioning that none of the scenes I saw were without you. Zombies? Hearing Tony Stark's words, Su-Che was slightly surprised. He does know that among the countless parallel universes, there is indeed a Marvel zombie universe. As for the White Tank Iron Man and Extremis, this is also a matter of another parallel universe. Why would hallucinogens allow Tony to see these scenes? Could it be that Tony Stark's brain developed to use hallucinogens to see parallel universes? This shouldn't be so. Seeing that Su-Che fell silent, Tony Stark didn't continue, but continued to eat with his breakfast. But think about it. Among the illusions I saw, the world without Su was truly terrifying. Damn it. How did I see those scenes? Is it because of the pessimism hidden in my subconscious that I didn't realize? It shouldn't be. By the way, Su, did you say that the person who released the hallucinogens was caught? After eating breakfast for a while, Tony Stark suddenly raised his head. After breakfast, shall we go and see 30? I'm really curious, who actually targeted us too? Okay. Facing Tony's invitation, Su-Che nodded. He also knew who had the guts to treat himself as a target. The only thing that is certain is, this group of people is definitely not a villain created by the system. Because, I haven't created a third villain yet. At the same time, a certain parallel universe. With a long sigh of relief, Tony Stark, who often had a scar on his face, opened his eyes, panting heavily. Damn it, how could I see things in other parallel universes? Is it a dream? Or is it because of the gem of wisdom in my head that I named Anthony, so I connected to myself in other parallel universes, and then saw things in other parallel universes? Squeezing the space between his brows lightly, Tony Stark stretched out his hand to pick up the ice water next to him and drank it down. After drinking a glass of ice water, Tony Stark let out a long sigh of relief. In fact, Tanya Stark is more willing to believe it is the latter. Only. Standing up from the ground, Tanya Stark got up and went to the window to look outside. The world that was supposed to be prosperous has turned into ruins at this moment. The Earth, which was originally full of vitality, is now withered. Of the population of more than 7 billion, those who have long since withered are left with less than 10 million people lingering on their last legs. Maybe it won't be long before the universe I'm in will be destroyed. Looking at the ruins in front of him, Tony Stark subconsciously stretched out his hand to touch the scar on his face. This is a scar from the top of the head to the cheek. This is the scar left by that Mr. Fantastic. Damn, I used to trust Mr. Fantastic Reed Richards so much. He even formed with him the Illuminati led by himself and him, including Doctor Strange, Professor X, Black Bolt King, Namor and others. Unexpectedly, this damn guy went crazy and wanted to reshape this universe. Even for this reason, he opened his own head and took out the wisdom gem Anthony. If it wasn't for people like myself who won in the end, then I'm afraid this universe would have been destroyed long ago. Can be used as a counterweight to Mr. Fantastic Reed Richards and Nemesis, awakened by 7 infinite gems. All Avengers Alliance superheroes, Illuminati members, and mutants are all dead. It's hard to imagine that the cooperation between Wanda with Origin Magic Power and Shin Grey with Phoenix Force is not the opponent of the Nemesis. You know, that is the Phoenix Force that cannot die no matter what, and the Origin Magic Power that can destroy more than 90% of the world without a mutant. He sighed insignificantly, and looked over his head at the dilapidated Avengers Alliance. At the moment, there are pieces of equipment hanging on the wall that once belonged to those superheroes or supervillains. Shattered Captain America shield, Professor X's wheelchair, Doctor Strange's tattered cloak, Thanos' double-edged sword, Magneto's helmet, Peter Parker's web shooters. The only ones left alive on the whole Earth are myself, who lost his battle armor, and Thor, who was blind, lost all his strength and became an alcoholic. Well. With a long sigh, Tony Stark walked to the wine cabinet with dark eyes, and picked up a bottle of wine covered with dust. There is no need for a cup, just open it and drink it. There are more than 7 billion people on the Earth, and now there are less than 10 million left. All primitives have long since dried up. Internet, electricity, food, and clean water have all disappeared. The Earth will no longer grow crops, and the mountains will collapse and the sea will rise. The Ice Age is approaching, and the world is about to be annihilated. No matter how smart he is, there is nothing he can do at this moment. All he could do was wait quietly for death to come. Hey, I don't know if this result is what Reed wants to see. After taking a sip of the drink, Tony Stark turned around and lay down on the somewhat dirty bed. He reached out and took out the lost picture of Pepper and put it on his chest. Anthony, was the dream I had last night an illusion, or did I have a connection with myself in a parallel universe? I think it should be the latter. If it is true, how wonderful it would be. Talking to himself, Tanya Stark laughed dejectedly. That's right, since Anthony was taken out of Reed's operation, he has lost the ability to talk to himself. Even at the last minute, Professor X teamed up with Doctor Strange to put Anthony back in his head. But it never replied to itself. It's like a car that has lost energy and can no longer start. Sir, according to the analysis, it should be that you have connected with yourself in a parallel universe. Tony Stark, who had no hope at first, just closed his eyes when Anthony's voice re-emerged in his mind. Hearing this voice, Tony Stark suddenly opened his eyes and sat up excitedly from the bed. Anthony. Is that you, dude? You. Are you really reactivated? The hands that were a little excited were a little trembling. Tanya Stark was worried that this was just his own auditory hallucination. Yes, sir, although I don't know why, but I did regain consciousness. Facing the emotional Tony Stark, Anthony replied immediately. Great, great. After confirming that this is the voice in my mind, not my own auditory hallucinations. Tony Stark didn't care about the bottle of red wine he opened in his hand that kept spilling on the sheets. Trying hard to control my trembling voice. God bless, this is simply the best news after I have experienced the end-time disaster and lost everything. Anthony, since you have recovered, you must have a way to save this world that is about to collapse, right? Guys, let's reunite and save this ruined world together. Sorry, sir, there is no way to save this world. Facing the excited Tony Stark, who still wants to save the world again. Anthony, the jewel of wisdom, was silent for a moment, and then gave his opinion. At present, all resources in this world have been exhausted, and food, water, weather, energy, etc. are no longer enough to support human beings to continue to survive on the Earth. There are only 9.3 million people left in the world out of 7 billion people, although these 9.3 million people are working hard every day to survive. But the survivors have no possibility of living without any deviation, and they are dying at a rate of hundreds of thousands every day. Sir, no matter what you choose, the Earth will eventually be destroyed, maybe next month, maybe 2 months later. But it will definitely not exceed 3 months. According to the analysis of the current situation, after 3 months, the Earth will enter a real ice age. Listening to Anthony's words in his mind, Tony Stark was still very excited. At this moment, it gradually became silent. Is this the curse of Nemesis before he turned into his own gem again? Huh. Rubbing his cheeks vigorously, Tony Stark lay down on the bed again. His eyes were empty and helpless. Earth, only 3 months left. However, sir, if we can find a way to go to the parallel universe, maybe we can save some people. Perhaps it was feeling the decadent mood of Tony Stark. Anthony, the gemstone of wisdom, gave his final suggestion. If the channel between the current universe and the parallel world universe can be opened, then a group of people may be saved. Definitely, sir, the premise is that other universes actively choose to open the connection point of our universe. After all, this universe does not have any resources to provide a medium to open parallel universes. However, the possibility of this is extremely small. Hearing Anthony's words, the originally decadent Tony's eyes lit up, but soon he laughed at himself. Oh, that is to say, we can only pray that people from other parallel universes will open the channel and come to save us. That's right, now we have nothing else to do but pray. After all, our universe lost all resources because of Nemesis's curse before his death after that great war. Even the most basic cars and planes are rendered useless. Rubbing his cheeks with his hands, Tony Stark closed his eyes unwillingly. Leave your fate to God. Oh, what a helpless choice. Sir, actually last night because of my recovery fluctuation, you were connected with yourself in other parallel universes. If you can connect with Mr. Tony Stark of that parallel universe again, then maybe it is not impossible to open the passage to the parallel world. Listening to Anthony's words, Tony Stark made a list. But soon, he stared at the ceiling and said, Anthony, the connection is mutual. Last night, I was able to connect to another parallel world. On the one hand, it was because of the fluctuations in your recovery as a gem of wisdom. On the other hand, I didn't know what happened to me in another universe. I want to connect with me in another world again. This is not something I can do unilaterally. So, Antonian, what's the difference between this so-called opportunity and those who pin their hopes and miracles on God? Speaking of this, Tony Stark laughed at himself. Oh, there is still a difference, but the difference is that one is God, and the other is me in the parallel world. Facing Tony Stark's self-mockery, Anthony the Wisdom Gem was silent. How does it not know that Tony Stark is telling the truth? Hey, just wait. Let me guard this world until the last moment. Perhaps this is the only thing I can do for this world. Really? Very unwilling. The last sentence seemed to be said to Anthony, the jewel of wisdom, but it seemed to be said to himself. Perhaps only Tony Stark's flushed eyes would know. This is not reconciled. Who is it said to? At the same time, inside the shield of another universe. So, someone hired you to add hallucinogens to sus food? Look at the two culprits caught by S.H.I.E.L.D. in front of you. Tony Stark sat beside Su Che and asked while crossing his arms. No, in fact, it's not that someone hired me, but I am the mastermind of this matter. In the face of Tony Stark's questioning, the alias Alan West in front of him, that is, the deputy of the restaurant who poisoned Su Che, said very easily, including the hallucinogen against Mr. Tony Stark, I am the one who order issued. Watching Alan West cooperate so well, Tony Stark and Su Che looked at each other, and then asked, I don't understand, why only use hallucinogens? Su said that your hallucinogen this time is more like a warning than to poison us. Why? I want to know why. Faced with Tony Stark's curiosity, Alan West was silent for a while. A backquote because you saved my daughter. As he said that, Alan West took out a photo from his coat pocket and handed it to the two people. It's cute, isn't it? Her name is Ellie, and she is 9 years old this year. Actually, I belong to a very mysterious organization, so mysterious that I don't even know the name of the organization or what the organization does. My only mission is to hide my identity and live in New York like a normal person. Until this organization wakes me up and provides me with missions. 6 months ago, during the battle in New York, my daughter Ellie and her mother were shopping on the streets of Manhattan, as usual on weekends. But, that day aliens invaded. Speaking of this, Alan West reached out and took back the photo of her daughter. The situation was really dangerous at the time, and I couldn't make it through. Fortunately, at the most dangerous time, their mother and daughter were saved by you Avengers. So, I thank you all from the bottom of my heart, really very grateful. Originally, I thought that although I was grateful to you, I would not have any interaction with you. But a few days ago, the organization suddenly found me and asked me to find a way to monitor you too. Yes, only you two, not all Avengers. I don't know exactly what the organization wants to do, but I know very well that they should want to deal with you. As he spoke, Alan West spread his hands and smiled. I can't betray my organization, but I can't harm you, because you saved my wife and my daughter. I can't contact you directly, so I can only use this method to remind you, and then find a loophole to be caught. In this way, the organization behind me will only think that I was caught leaking traces to complete the task of monitoring you, and it is not a betrayal of the organization. Because the organization doesn't know about hallucinogens at all, my other companion will never betray me. So, the organization won't hurt my wife and daughter. 3 days later, in the evening, the site of the World Expo. Wow. Aunt May, that's Iron Man, it's Iron Man. The 8-year-old Peter Parker dropped from the air to Tony Stark on the stage wearing a suit of armor. Immediately cheered and took Aunt May's hand and screamed. In the other hand, she holds a model of the Iron Man helmet that Aunt May bought for herself before entering the fair. Everyone is very excited. Seeing little Peter's excited look, Aunt May looked at Tony Stark on the stage, who was waiting for the armor to talk about the latest energy developed by Stark Industries. Then he said with a smile, "Yes, that is the famous Iron Man, Peter, he is your idol." Looking at the smile on Aunt May's face, little Peter Parker nodded vigorously. "I admire Iron Man the most." "Then you should study hard." Gently touched Peter's head. "Only by studying hard, will it be possible to work in Stark Industry in the future, and then you will be able to see the idol you admire every day. In addition, you must eat more vegetables and not picky eaters, so that your body will become stronger. Maybe our little Peter will become a superhero like Iron Man." Hearing Aunt May's words, Peter Parker, who was still very excited, blinked his eyes. He looked at Tony Stark, who was shining brightly on the stage at the moment. He looked at Aunt May again. After the little face twitched for a moment, he raised his head and asked Aunt May, "If I eat broccoli that I don't like every day, then in the future I will become someone like him who can defeat aliens and save the world. Superhero." "Most definitely." Looking at the small face of Peter Parker's hesitation, Aunt May nodded with a smile on her face. "All right." Taking a deep breath, the 8-year-old Peter Parker clenched his fists, as if he had made up his mind. "Then from tomorrow onwards, I won't hate eating broccoli anymore." "Awesome." Rubbing little Peter Parker's head, Aunt May encouraged gently. After speaking for more than half an hour, Tony Stark walked off the stage in his armor. Backstage. "The speech was very good. I think that after today, our orders for new energy from Stark Industries will definitely increase a lot." Stepped up and gave Tony a kiss, then Pepper said with a smile, "Actually, this should be your job." Accepting Pepper's kiss, Tony Stark opened his armor and walked out. "But who made me the largest shareholder of Stark Industries and your beloved boyfriend? So, I can only reluctantly buy it." He raised his hand and patted Tony, and Pepper stretched out his hand to help Tony straighten his tie. "Actually, you really enjoy this kind of cheering scene, don't you? And to be honest, your speech effect is indeed better than mine. At least your ability in this aspect is still very high. In fact, I have a higher ability. Maybe we should go home." "Come on." Before Tony could finish speaking, Pepper pushed him angrily. Glancing at the lounge, he said to Tony, after a short rest, "You can go back first. I will take Harpy and other directors of Stark Industry around the expo. After all, such a good opportunity does not come every year. Maybe there will be a lot of partners today." Listening to Pepper's words, Tony Stark spread his hands. "Tisk, you still want to sign a contract on such a beautiful night, really? I'm not like you, Tony. Since I'm the CEO of Stark Industries, I should help Stark Industries even more." All right. Before Pepper could finish speaking, Tony stepped forward and gave Pepper a kiss. "Thank you for your hard work, my beautiful CEO. Oh, if you don't cause trouble, then I won't work so hard." Smiling at Tony, Pepper turned and left the lounge. Watching Pepper leave, Tony Stark sat on a chair in the lounge and took a sip of water. Then he asked Jarvis, "Jarvis, I should not be needed for the next few days of the expo." "Sir, tomorrow is an exhibition in the field of civilian vehicles, and the day after tomorrow is an exhibition of military weapons, but you have announced the permanent closure of Stark Industries' weapons manufacturing department, so the military industry the day after tomorrow has nothing to do with Stark Industries. This time the military industry is dominated by Hanmer Industries, so you can rest assured." Listening to Jarvis's answer, Tony Stark nodded. "What about Yi? What is he writing about?" "I don't know, sir. Do you need me to mobilize your private satellite to find Mr. Su, or give him a call?" "Forget it. I don't like spying on my friends." Waving his hand, Nay Stark took another sip of ice water. He put down the cup and was silent for a while, then asked Jarvis, "Jarvis, 3 days have passed, you should have analyzed the ingredients of the hallucinogen in the advanced version of the hallucinogen." "Sir, The ingredients of the hallucinogen in you have been analyzed, and it is a very common hallucinogen on the market. The only difference is that this hallucinogen has a relatively high purity and is legal. As for the advanced version, sir, it has been made, but I don't recommend you to use it. As long as it is a drug, it is originally toxic. For the sake of your health, I don't think you should take it. Listening to Jarvis' advice, Tony Stark walked up to Mark's armor and patted it lightly. The battle armor was automatically put on Tony's body. I also know I shouldn't use it, but I always feel like something is calling me. Remember my sentence? Maybe sometimes it's okay to learn to run first and then learn to walk. While controlling the armor to take off, Tony Stark said, by the way, add the nano armor to the memo. Dr. Helen Zhao's regeneration cradle is very interesting. Maybe I should try the nano armor too. Although, compared to this armor, the nano warframe lacks a sense of mechanics. Listening to Tony's order, Jarvis began to execute without any hesitation. Sir, the nano armor has been included in the memo. Also, are you planning to go back and try some advanced hallucinogens? If you have this plan, then I suggest you call Mr. Su in advance. At least Mr. Su is here, and you will be protected when you are in danger. As expected of my most trusted co-pilot, Jarvis, I have to say that you were really caring. Facing the suggestion given by Jarvis again, Tony Stark praised. But for the time being, I should be able to deal with it. The advanced version of hallucinogens should not have any major side effects.